My 102-year-old father had just been rushed into the ER. I was speeding down a snowy highway in the middle of the night when I called my wife. In a calm voice, she said, "I'm already here with your dad. Just drive safe. Don't rush." I trusted her completely. But when I ran into the hospital, Nurse Richards looked confused. "Mr. Frost, you're the first family member to arrive. We've been waiting 3 hours for someone to sign the treatment forms." My blood ran cold. I immediately asked to check the security footage from room 412, and what I saw horrified me. This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. Before we continue, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Your perspective matters. Quick note, some details are fictionalized for storytelling, but the heart of this story, the message about family justice and difficult choices, is what truly matters. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. while I was doing 70 on I-84 40 minutes from home, and the voice on the other end used the word respiratory failure about my 102-year-old father. I kept both hands on the wheel of my silver Ford F250 as light snow crossed the headlight beams. 3 days consulting in Albany and now this. The ER nurse identified herself as Richards, her voice professional and measured. "Mr. Frost, this is Hartford Hospital. Your father was admitted at 10:15 p.m. with acute respiratory failure." I gripped the wheel tighter. "Is he stable?" "He's on oxygen, but we need a family member to sign emergency care authorization before 6 a.m. tomorrow." Emergency care authorization. My engineer's mind processed, 102 years old respiratory failure, midnight 40 minutes away, paperwork deadline. I told her I'd be there in 35 and hung up. Then I called Adrienne. My wife answered on the third ring, her voice carrying that smooth, controlled warmth she used at foundation board meetings, the voice of someone who had everything under control. "Adrienne, Hartford Hospital just called about Dad. I'm 40 minutes out. I'm here, Lawrence. I'm with him right now. You don't need to rush." I felt something loosen in my chest. "You're at the hospital right now." "I got the call an hour ago. I've been here since 10:30. He's stable. They have him on oxygen, and I already talked to Dr. Morrison about the authorization forms." The relief was immediate. Adrienne was 52, the CEO of Meridian Education Partners and a board member of 3 nonprofit foundations. When she said she had something handled, she meant it. What did Morrison say about his condition? Pneumonia, probably. "They're running tests, but he's resting comfortably, and I'm staying until you get here." I eased off the accelerator slightly. Knowing Adrienne was there with my father made the drive feel less urgent. "Thank you for going," I said. "I know it's late." Of course, he's family. I was about to hang up when I heard it in the background. A pleasant, automated female voice with that particular digital smoothness that sounds almost human but not quite. "This is your floor." I froze. There are sounds you learn to trust when your life depends on precision. A server error tone, a failing hard drive click, a hotel elevator's automated politeness. I'd spent 25 years as a systems engineer traveling for work, staying in hundreds of hotels. I knew that sound. That wasn't a hospital intercom, that was a hotel elevator speaker. Adrienne kept talking smooth and unhurried. "The doctors said we should have more information by morning. There's really no need to speed, Lawrence. The roads are getting bad." "Adrienne," I said carefully, "what was that sound?" "What sound? It's just the hospital, Lawrence. The elevators here are very modern." Modern. Hartford Hospital was built in 1957. I'd been there a dozen times. The elevators were ancient, loud, mechanical. They announced floors with a bell, not a voice. "I didn't say that." "Okay," I said. "I'll see you there." I hung up. For 3 seconds, I sat in silence. The snow kept falling. The windshield wipers kept their steady rhythm. My speedometer read 70. Then I pressed the accelerator and watched the needle climb to 85. I didn't call her back. I didn't calculate next steps. I just drove and counted. How many times had I believed her without checking the metadata? That's how my brain works. I don't think in emotions first. I think in systems, in patterns, in data points that either align or don't. And this data point didn't align. She said she was at Hartford Hospital at 11:50 p.m. on a Sunday night. The background acoustics said she was in a hotel elevator. One of those statements was a lie. I thought about calling the hospital to verify, but that would tip my hand. If she was lying, she'd know I'd caught her the moment I asked. And I wanted to know why before she knew I knew. 25 years of engineering complex systems had taught me gather all the data before you start troubleshooting. So I drove. The snow thickened as I passed the Farmington exit. I kept it at 85 and tried to think. Why would Adrienne lie about being at the hospital with my dying father? The most obvious explanation, she was somewhere else and didn't want me to know. A hotel based on the elevator sound. But why an affair seemed too simple. Adrienne wasn't reckless. She planned everything. She documented everything. She didn't take risks that could damage her reputation, unless the risk was worth it. I took the Hartford exit at 12:22 a.m. The city was quiet, streets empty except for a few late-shift workers and one snowplow. Hartford Hospital sat on a hill above Asylum Avenue, its windows glowing yellow against the dark sky. I parked in the emergency lot and sat for a moment with the engine running. If Adrienne wasn't here, my father was alone. If she was here, I'd just driven like a maniac based on an elevator sound I might have misheard. But I hadn't misheard. I turned off the engine and stepped out into the snow. The automatic doors slid open into fluorescent brightness. A security guard nodded at me from behind a desk. The ER waiting room held 3 people, an elderly man holding his wrist, a young woman with a sleeping toddler, a middle-aged guy staring at his phone. "No, Adrienne." I walked to the reception desk. The woman behind the glass looked up. "I'm Lawrence Frost. My father, Ernest Frost, was admitted around 10:15. Respiratory failure." She typed on her computer. "Room 317, 3rd floor. Take the elevator to your left." "Has anyone else been up to see him tonight?" She checked her screen. "No visitors logged since admission." "No visitors." I didn't call her back. I just pressed the accelerator and watched the speedometer climb to 85. The snow kept falling. The road kept disappearing under my headlights. And somewhere in the silence of that Ford F250 cab, a question started forming that I wouldn't be able to ignore. If she lied about being at the hospital tonight, what else had she lied about for 14 years? The elevator to the 3rd floor took 43 seconds. I counted. Ursula Valencia, 49, head nurse on the 4th floor, met me at the nurse's station with the kind of professional eyes that had seen too many families at midnight not to recognize when someone was trying to assemble a truth they didn't want to find. "Mr. Frost, your father was admitted at 10:15 p.m. We've been waiting for family to sign the intensive care authorization." I set my keys on the counter. "My wife, Adrienne Frost. She said she was here." Ursula's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "She was here at 10:12 p.m. She said she needed to call you first before signing anything. Then she left. That was 3 hours ago." 3 hours ago. The elevator sound replayed in my head. The automated voice. "This is your floor." She'd been here. She'd walked into this hospital, seen my dying father, and walked out without signing the papers that would authorize his care. Then she'd called me from a hotel elevator and lied about being here. "Where is he?" I asked. Before Ursula could answer, a man stepped forward. Dr. Craig Morgan, 55, with the measured authority of an ER physician who'd delivered serious news at midnight too many times to waste words on anything but clarity. "Mr. Frost, at 102 years old, every hour we wait is a risk. Your father's in acute respiratory failure. We've stabilized him on oxygen, but I need a legal guardian's signature now to proceed with intensive care protocol." "What does he need?" "Intensive respiratory support, possibly intubation if he declines, but I need your authorization." I reached for the clipboard Ursula was already holding out. "Where do I sign?" Dr. Morgan pointed to 3 highlighted sections. I signed all of them without reading. My hand was steady. That surprised me. "Can I see him?" I asked. Ursula nodded. "Room 412, 4th floor. I'll take you up." We rode the elevator in silence. The hospital at 12:40 a.m. had that particular quiet that comes from machinery running and people trying not to disturb the dying. Fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere a monitor beeped. A patient coughed behind a closed door. Ursula led me down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and floor wax. She stopped at room 412 and pushed the door open. Ernest Frost, 102 years old, lay against white hospital pillows with an oxygen mask covering most of his face. When he opened his eyes later, they would be sharp as glass, the eyes of a man who'd sat on the federal bench for 4 decades. But right now, those eyes were closed. Monitors beeped a steady rhythm. An IV ran into his left arm, the skin there so thin I could see every vein. Through the window, Seymour Street lay under fresh snow, empty except for one set of tire tracks. "He's been asking for you since he arrived," Ursula said quietly. "Has anyone else visited besides my wife?" "Just her, for about 6 minutes." 6 minutes. I did the math automatically. She'd arrived at 10:12 p.m., left at 10:18 p.m., drove to a hotel based on the elevator sound, probably the Delamar or the Study at Yale, both 20 minutes away, called me at 11:49 p.m. from that hotel elevator. 23 minutes of driving, 91 minutes unaccounted for. Ursula touched my shoulder briefly. "I'll be at the nurse's station if you need anything." She left, closing the door with the practiced silence of someone who knows how to give families space with their dying. I pulled the chair close to the bed and sat. Showing up isn't complicated. You either do or you don't, and every excuse in between is just another way of choosing not to. Adrienne had been here. She'd stood in this room, looked at this man who'd been part of our family for 14 years, and walked away without signing 3 pieces of paper that would authorize his care. Not because she didn't understand the stakes. She was CEO of an education company. She understood authorization forms better than most lawyers. She walked away because she chose to. The yellow bedside lamp cast soft shadows across my father's face. I'd seen him age over the years, watched the skin thin, the hands shake, the walk slow from steady to careful to shuffling. But he'd always been sharp, federal judge sharp. The kind of sharp that could parse a legal argument in 3 sentences and find the flaw you'd spent weeks hiding. I reached for his hand on the blanket. The moment our hands touched, his eyes opened. Not patient eyes, judge's eyes. He looked at me for 3 seconds without moving. Then he raised one finger and gestured me to lean close. I leaned down. He pulled the oxygen mask aside slightly, and when he spoke, his voice was hoarse but clear. "You came alone." Not a question, a statement. "I came as fast as I could, Dad." He looked at me with those sharp eyes that had presided over 40 years of testimony. How long had my father been alone before I walked through that door? 3 hours since Adrienne left. But that wasn't what he was asking. "She was here," I said, "earlier, for a few minutes." He didn't blink, didn't nod, just watched me with an expression I couldn't read. "She said she had to call me first," I added, "before signing the papers." Still nothing. Then he said so quietly I almost missed it, "You came alone." He didn't say it like a question. He said it like a confirmation of something he'd known for a long time and had just now received final proof of. Not surprise recognition. And the look in those 102-year-old eyes, former federal judge eyes that had presided over 40 years of testimony, told me he'd been watching my marriage longer than I'd been willing to see it. I woke at 7:15 a.m. in the plastic chair beside my father's bed with a stiff neck and one clear thought: I needed to see the security footage from last night. Ernest was still sleeping, oxygen mask fogging slightly with each breath. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Morning light came through the window at an angle that said January pale and thin. I stood, carefully pulled the blanket higher on his chest and walked out. Ursula was at the nurse's station marking something on a chart. She looked up when I approached. "I need to review security footage from last night," I said. "4th floor hallway between 10 p.m. and midnight." She set down her pen. "You're the legal guardian on file. Derek Walsh in security can help you. 1st floor east wing past the cafeteria." "Thank you. Which cameras cover the patient rooms?" "Camera 4B gets to the hallway outside 410 through 414. Your father's room is in that range." I took the stairs instead of the elevator. My mind was already organizing what I needed to ask for: specific time range, specific camera angle documentation of exactly when Adrienne arrived and when she left. Not why she left, that wasn't a question security footage could answer. But how long she stayed, what she did while she was here, whether she spoke to anyone, those were data points I could collect. The security office sat behind a door marked "Staff Only," next to a vending machine that hummed too loud. I knocked once and walked in. Derek Walsh, hospital security officer in his early 40s, wore the practiced patience of someone who'd handled hundreds of footage requests but still checked legal authorization before pulling up a single frame. He looked up from a desk covered in monitor screens. "I need the procedure documented," I said. "Legal guardian of patient 412 reviewing family visit timeline." He typed something on his keyboard. "System shows you're authorized. What time range?" 10 p.m. to midnight, 4th floor hallway." The room smelled like coffee and electronics, that particular scent of machines running 24 hours in a small space. 16 screens showed different hospital corridors in pale blue LED light. Derek pulled up camera 4B on the center monitor and scrolled backward through timestamp markers. "Here," he said, at 9:45 p.m. "I'll play forward from there." He hit play at normal speed. At 10:09 p.m., Adrienne walked into frame. She wore her camel coat, the Burberry one she saved for board meetings and donor events. Her hair was perfect. She walked with purpose down the hallway, glanced at the chart holder outside room 412, and pushed the door open. The camera angle showed most of the doorway. Through the narrow window in the door, I could see movement inside the room. "Can you note the exact timestamps?" I asked. Derek pulled out a small notebook. "Entry 100903. I watched the monitor. Adrienne's silhouette moved through the room window. She leaned over the bed, took something out of her purse. Her phone. What's the difference between being somewhere and performing being somewhere for people who aren't watching? She adjusted the angle, leaned closer. The phone's screen glowed bright in the dim room light. She was taking a selfie, not checking his oxygen levels, not reading his chart, not calling for a nurse, taking a picture of herself next to my unconscious father. At 10:15 p.m., she walked out of the room, pulled the door closed behind her, and headed straight for the elevator. She didn't look back, didn't stop at the nurse's station, didn't speak to anyone. Derek wrote in his notebook, "Exit 10:15:17. Can you replay the section where she's in the room?" He scrolled back and played it again. I watched her lean over Ernest's phone raised, adjusting the frame. The selfie took maybe 8 seconds to compose. Then she straightened, checked the photo on her screen, and put the phone back in her purse. 6 minutes and 14 seconds total. No interaction with my father. No acknowledgement of the monitors showing his oxygen saturation, his heart rate, his blood pressure. No glance at the IV drip rate. No call button pressed for a nurse. Just the photo op. "One more time," I said. "I need to see what she was holding when she left." Derek played it a third time. Nothing. Just her phone and purse. No paperwork, no authorization forms, no medical information sheet. 6 minutes enough time to prove you showed up, not enough time to prove you cared. "Can you provide me a copy of this timestamp log?" I asked. Derek tore the page from his notebook and handed it to me. "You want the video file?" "Yes. How do I request that officially?" "Legal guardian can submit a written request to medical records. Takes about 48 hours to process." I folded the timestamp log and put it in my pocket. "Thank you." I stood there for another moment watching the frozen frame on the monitor. Adrienne in the doorway, one hand on the frame phone, in the other hand face turned away from my father toward the hallway, toward the exit. She'd driven 23 minutes from wherever she was, home maybe, or the office, to Hartford Hospital. She'd walked from the parking lot through the ER entrance, taken the elevator to the 4th floor, found room 412, and walked in. 6 minutes and 14 seconds later, she walked out. No nurse consultation, no doctor update, no emergency authorization signed, just proof of presence captured in her phone's camera roll. I thought about the call at 11:49 p.m., her smooth voice saying, "I'm here, Lawrence. I'm with him right now." The automated elevator voice in the background. "This is your floor." She'd left the hospital at 10:15 p.m., called me from a hotel 94 minutes later, lied about being at the hospital while I was doing 85 on I-84 trying to get to my dying father. I stood in front of that 16-screen grid and did the math. 6 minutes and 14 seconds, enough time to take a picture and construct an alibi. Not enough time to speak to a nurse, read a chart, or sign a single page of emergency authorization. And somewhere in those 6 minutes, she'd raised her phone and captured my father's sleeping face, not to remember him, but to prove to someone else she'd been there. I needed to know who she was proving it to. I drove home to Greenwich at 1:30 p.m., walked past the kitchen where Adrienne's coffee mug still sat from yesterday morning, and went straight upstairs to my office. Walnut desk, 3 monitors, filing cabinet with 14 years of organized records, navy Roman blinds filtering January light into something manageable. This was where I'd designed infrastructure systems for 25 years, server architecture, network redundancy, fail-safe protocols. Systems that worked because I understood that patterns aren't accidents, they're architecture. I powered on all 3 monitors. Monitor 1, my Google Calendar work schedule going back 2 years. Monitor 2, Adrienne's Meridian Foundation public events calendar pulled from their website. Monitor 3, blank, ready for the next data layer. If she lied about the hospital, what system made that lie possible? I started with my consulting schedule. Albany trips for the state education database migration, Boston infrastructure audits, Hartford client site visits. A predictable pattern averaging 2 to 3 nights away per month. Overnight stays flagged in blue on my calendar. Then I opened Adrienne's foundation calendar in the second window. Public events board meetings, gala planning sessions, donor cultivation dinners. All documented with professional precision because nonprofits run on transparency and public record. I pulled up July 2024 and started comparing. July 12th, I was in Albany installing server racks. Adrienne had emergency board dinner 7 to 9 p.m. I grabbed a legal pad and wrote July 12th match. July 23rd, Albany again overnight database testing. Adrienne gala planning committee 6 to 10 p.m. July 23rd match. August 3rd, Boston infrastructure audit 2 nights. Adrienne donor cultivation evening. August 3rd match. I worked through August, then September, then October. Every time I had an overnight trip, I checked her calendar for evening events. Not approximate overlaps, exact dates. By 2:30 p.m. I had 11 matches. By 2:47 p.m. I had 17. 17 instances in 6 months. Every single overnight trip I took for work. Albany, Boston, Hartford client sites. Adrienne scheduled an evening foundation meeting. Not most of them, not some of them, all of them. I stared at the legal pad with 17 yellow highlighter marks and felt something shift in my understanding of the past 6 months. I wasn't her husband. I was the variable. She controlled the schedule. She optimized around the absence she required. Some of the meetings were legitimate public record. The October gala had 200 attendees and raised $500,000 for education programs. But others were vague calendar entries. Foundation strategy session 7 to 10 p.m. Board member consultation evening. donor meeting private. Every single one scheduled for nights when I wouldn't be home. Not a pattern, a system. She wasn't working around my schedule, she was using it. I opened the filing cabinet and pulled the accordion folder marked Credit Cards 2024. We'd always kept joint accounts. Transparent finances, she'd said. Nothing to hide, she'd said. I'd appreciated that about our marriage, the mutual trust, the shared access, the assumption that we were building something together. I spread the statements across the walnut desk beside the legal pad with 17 highlighted dates. July 12th, my first Albany overnight. Her emergency board dinner. I found the July statement and ran my finger down the charges. Grocery store, gas station, Starbucks. Then Zinc New Haven, $287, July 12th, 8:43 p.m. Zinc, New Haven. Not Hartford, where the Meridian Foundation office was located. New Haven, 45 minutes south of Greenwich, 90 minutes from Hartford. A city where we had no family, no regular commitments, no reason to be. I pulled up Monitor 3 and searched Zinc New Haven restaurant. Upscale American bistro. Wine bar. Intimate atmosphere. Reservations recommended. I went back to the credit card statement. Location data was embedded in the merchant code New Haven, Connecticut. Time 8:43 p.m. Amount $287 enough for 2 people, wine, appetizers, entrees. That night she texted me at 9:15 p.m. Long board meeting, heading home soon. I checked August 3rd, Boston audit trip 2 nights. Her calendar said donor cultivation evening. August statement, the study at Yale, $412. August 3rd, 9:17 p.m. New Haven. Again. September 18th. Albany overnight, her calendar, Foundation Strategy dinner. September statement, Union League Cafe, $356, September 18th, 8:31 p.m. New Haven. 3 matches, 3 New Haven restaurants, 3 nights I was out of town. I started checking the other 14 dates. 11 of the 17 showed restaurant charges in New Haven on the exact nights I was traveling. Always upscale places, always between $250 and $450, always evening hours. How many times had I kissed her goodbye at the door, thinking she'd spend quiet evenings at Foundation events when she was counting down hours until I cleared the driveway. I pulled out my phone and opened our text thread from July 12th. Her message at 9:15 p.m. Long board meeting, heading home soon. Love you. I'd replied, drive safe, see you tomorrow night. She'd sent back a heart emoji. She was sitting in Zinc New Haven with someone who wasn't me, spending $287 on dinner, texting me about a board meeting that didn't exist in any public Foundation record I could find. I opened Monitor 3 and pulled up the Meridian Foundation's July board meeting minutes publicly posted on their website per nonprofit transparency requirements. July board meeting, July 9th, 6:00 p.m., 12 members present, minutes approved and posted July 11th. No emergency meeting on July 12th. I checked August. Regular board meeting August 6th, nothing on August 3rd. September board meeting, September 10th, nothing on September 18th. 17 dates, 11 restaurant charges in New Haven, 0 matching Foundation meetings in public record. I spread 6 months of credit card statements across the walnut desk and looked at the first highlighted date, July 12th, Zinc New Haven, $287 at 8:43 p.m. the night I was installing server infrastructure in Albany, the night she texted me, long board meeting, heading home soon. 17 dates, 17 lies, and every single one of them had a paper trail with timestamps, location data, and merchant codes. Pattern wasn't enough anymore. I needed the logs. The logs were already waiting for me. The phone buzzed at 4:15 p.m. with an iMessage notification, and I watched the same message appear simultaneously on the old MacBook sitting on the credenza, the one we'd set up with family Apple ID sharing in 2019 and never bothered to disconnect. I stared at the notification. The message was from an unknown number not in my contacts, but it was syncing to the MacBook in real time, which meant it was also syncing to Adrienne's account. Family sharing, photos, messages, calendar. We'd set it up when she got a new iPad for Foundation work. 1 Apple ID, multiple devices, everything synchronized. She'd forgotten about the old laptop. I walked to the credenza and opened the MacBook. The screen woke up showing the Messages app. A conversation thread with a contact saved as L, just the letter, no name. 3 months of history. I scrolled to September 2024. The first message was friendly professional. Thanks for the recommendation. I finished it in 2 days. By October, the tone had shifted. I don't want you to see this side of me. The response, I don't want you to see this side of me either. By November, we both know this is wrong. We both know we're not stopping. I kept scrolling. Not crude sexting. Real conversation. Discussions about books. Late-night philosophy about regret and choice. Arguments in the messages, then reconciliations. Plans to meet, hotel names I recognized from expense reports, dates that matched my Albany trips. This wasn't an affair of convenience. This was a relationship with depth and history. I read exactly 10 message exchanges. September 18th. Meet me at the study at 8. I have until midnight. October 12th. I wish we'd met before I was who I am now. November 3rd. You make me feel like the version of myself I gave up on. 10 lines. That was enough to know what this was. Betrayal with real feelings is worse than betrayal without them. Lies have expiration dates, but love leaves evidence that outlives the relationship. I closed the MacBook at 4:47 p.m. I didn't keep reading. Not because I couldn't handle it, because I didn't need to. The evidence existed. It was documented. It was preserved in cloud architecture that Adrienne had forgotten about when she deleted these conversations from her phone. I wasn't reading her love story. I was documenting evidence. The rest could wait. I sat there for 20 minutes looking at the closed laptop. Then I stood up, put on my coat, and walked 4 houses down Greenwich Avenue. Vernon Townsend, 74, retired postal supervisor who'd lived on this street since 1987, answered the door in flannel and reading glasses. He took one look at my face and said, "Come in," without asking questions. We sat in his kitchen that smelled like coffee and old wood. He didn't offer small talk. "Vernon, I need to ask you something. About last night at Hartford Hospital." He nodded slowly. "I was wondering when you'd come by." "You saw something." I saw Adrienne leaving, around 10 p.m. I was picking up prescriptions at the CVS across from the hospital entrance. My blood pressure medication came in late. She came out of the ER doors, walked straight to her Mercedes in the lot. Very rushed. Didn't look back. "What time exactly?" "Maybe 10:15. The pharmacy closes at 10:30. I was heading back to my car when I saw her." I pulled out my phone and showed him the timestamp Derek had written down. "Does 10:15:17 sound right?" Vernon looked at the note. "Could be. I wasn't checking my watch, but that's the right window. If I need you to confirm that officially, would you?" He didn't hesitate. "Anytime. Your father's a good man. Been on this street longer than most of us. If someone's not doing right by him, I'll say what I saw." How much do neighbors see that we think they don't notice the rushed exits, the late returns, the careful choreography of deception performed in driveways? "Thank you," I said. "You doing okay?" Vernon asked. I stood up. "I'm doing what needs doing." He walked me to the door. "Your father used to say that. Federal court, he'd come home after hard cases and your mother would ask how he was holding up. Doing what needs doing. That was always his answer." I walked back home at 8:30 p.m. The house was dark. Adrienne still hadn't come home, hadn't called, hadn't texted beyond the automated "thinking of you" and earnest message she'd sent at noon, probably scheduled in advance, maybe composed before she even knew he was in the hospital. I went back to my office, sat down at the desk, covered in credit card statements and calendar printouts, and opened my laptop. New document. Plain text file, saved as timeline.txt. I typed the first entry. Entry 001 January 12th, 2025, 23:47. Phone call from Hartford Hospital, ER Nurse Richards. RE Ernest Frost, respiratory failure. Called Adrienne immediately. Hotel elevator speaker, sound audible in background during call automated voice. "This is your floor," matches. The study at Yale or similar hotel system. Adrienne claimed to be at hospital with Ernest. Hospital records show she left at 22:15, 10:15 p.m., 93 minutes before call. I saved the file. Every investigation needs a timeline. Facts first. Chronological order, no gaps. I looked at the blue glow of the monitor and the single entry in the timeline file. 92 characters, the first piece of evidence in what I already knew would become hundreds. Somewhere in those deleted messages on the MacBook was a hotel name, meeting times, 3 months of coordination that matched my calendar. I didn't need to read them all tonight. The MacBook wasn't going anywhere. The messages were preserved in cloud storage that would survive phone deletions, device resets, even intentional erasure, because that's how Apple's architecture works. Redundancy, backup, fail-safe protocols. I sat in the blue glow of the monitor and looked at the timeline. .txt file, 1 entry. 92 characters, the first piece of evidence in what I already knew would become hundreds. Somewhere in those deleted messages was a hotel name meeting, times 3 months of coordination that matched my Albany calendar. I didn't need to read them all tonight. The MacBook wasn't going anywhere. The evidence was preserved. And for the first time since my father said, "You came alone," I wasn't just reacting, I was building a case. A case needs witnesses. I arrived at Hartford Hospital at 7:45 a.m. on January 14th with coffee I didn't drink and a question I needed answered: who else had been in that hallway the night Adrienne took her 6-minute selfie? Room 412 looked different in morning light. Ernest was sleeping peacefully, oxygen mask still in place, but the flow rate reduced from yesterday. The monitor showed steady vitals. His breathing had improved deeper, more regular. I pulled the plastic chair close to the bed and sat. I opened the timeline file on my phone and added entry 002, January 13th, 2025, 9:45, security footage review with Derek Walsh. Adrienne entered room 412 at 22:09:03, exited 22:15:17. Total time 6 minutes 14 seconds. Took selfie with patient, no nurse consultation, no paperwork signed. Ursula appeared in the doorway with a different expression than I'd seen before. Not the professional calm of a nurse delivering medical updates, but something more cautious. "Mr. Frost, do you have a moment?" I stood up. "Is Dad okay?" "He's stable. This is about something else. Someone wants to talk to you." I followed her into the hallway. She kept her voice low. "One of our cart attendants mentioned he saw your wife that night, in a spot the cameras don't cover well." I felt my pulse pick up. "Which attendant?" "Dwight Diaz. He's finishing his shift now. Didn't want to get involved, but I told him you're the legal guardian, you have a right to know what happened." She led me down the hallway toward the corner by the equipment storage room. The same hallway I'd watched on camera 4B, but now I was seeing it from ground level. The corner had a different geometry in person. There was a dead angle where the storage room wall blocked the camera's view. Dwight Diaz, 44, appeared with his equipment cart and a cleaning cloth in hand, wearing the careful, neutral expression of a man who'd spent years seeing things in hospital hallways that weren't his business to discuss. Lean-build hospital maintenance uniform hands that looked used to work. He glanced at Ursula, then at me. "I don't want trouble," he said. "But I saw your wife, she gave something to a man, an envelope." I kept my voice steady. "When, around 10:10 p.m., January 12th, I was pushing the cart past this corner heading to restock room 420. I saw her standing here talking to a man, navy jacket, khaki pants. She handed him a white envelope. They talked for maybe 30 seconds, then he walked toward room 418. What did he look like? White guy, maybe late 30s, dark hair, brown dress shoes. Nice ones, I noticed, because they didn't fit the hospital. And he wasn't wearing a visitor badge. The people we notice least cart attendants, cleaners, the ones who move through hallways like furniture. They see everything we think is invisible. "Room 418, I said. "What's in there?" Dwight looked at Ursula. She answered, "It was empty that night, supposed to stay empty for maintenance. Bathroom fixture repair scheduled for the 15th. "But he went in there," Dwight nodded. "For maybe 2 minutes, then came back out and left the floor. I watched him take the elevator down." I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. "Can you describe the envelope?" Standard white business envelope. Thin, not bulky. Could have been papers, could have been something else. "And you saw him again?" Dwight's expression shifted. "This morning, 6 a.m., same guy sitting in that chair right outside your father's room. Had coffee, newspaper, looked like family keeping vigil. When I made eye contact, he nodded at me like we were strangers sharing hospital solidarity. Navy jacket folded over the chair arm. I felt something cold settle in my chest. He was sitting outside room 412 this morning. Like he'd been there all night, natural as anything. If I hadn't seen the envelope exchange, I never would have questioned it. How many times do we assume someone belongs simply because they're sitting in the right chair holding the right coffee, wearing the right expression of concern? "Is he still there?" I asked. Dwight shook his head. "Left about 7:30 before the morning shift change." Ursula pulled out her phone. "I'll check the volunteer roster. Sometimes family friends register as support visitors, but if he wasn't wearing a badge..." "He wouldn't be on any roster," I said, "because Adrienne paid him to be here." Dwight looked uncomfortable. "I'm just telling you what I saw. I'm not accusing anyone of anything." "I understand. Would you be willing to confirm what you saw if it becomes necessary?" He hesitated, looked at the equipment cart like it might offer an excuse to leave. Then, "I'm just a cart guy. I don't want problems." "I know, but you saw what you saw." He met my eyes for 3 seconds. "Yeah, I saw what I saw." Ursula touched his shoulder. "Thank you, Dwight. You can finish your shift. I'll handle this." He nodded and pushed his cart down the hallway, moving with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned when to be seen and when to disappear. Ursula waited until he was gone. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking my wife hired someone to sit outside my father's room and pretend to be family. Gave him an envelope, probably cash, possibly instructions. Sent him to an empty room for 2 minutes, then positioned him where hospital staff would see him and assume he belonged. Creating a false record of presence," Ursula said quietly. "Exactly. She was here for 6 minutes. He was here for hours, maybe all night. Anyone checking on Ernest would see him and think family was present. If staff mentioned it later, she could claim she wasn't alone, someone else was watching over him." Ursula looked toward room 412. "That's calculated." "That's a system," I said. I stood in that 4th-floor hallway and looked toward room 412, where a man I'd never met had apparently sat all morning pretending to care about my father's recovery. Adrienne had handed him an envelope in a camera blind spot, sent him to an empty room, and positioned him as family witness. The question wasn't whether she'd hired someone to fake presence. The question was how much she'd paid and whether I could prove it before the man disappeared. I didn't have to wait long to prove it. Ursula went to the nurse's station at 9:15 a.m. and pulled up the volunteer database while I stood beside her watching the screen load with the kind of focus I used to reserve for debugging corrupted code. "No one matching that description is registered as volunteer for this floor," she said, scrolling through the list. "January 12th through 14th, we have 3 volunteers total. 2 women, 1 man in his 60s. "What about visitor log for room 412? She switched screens. "Just you. No one else has signed in since your father was admitted. No institutional authorization, no visitor badge, no paperwork trail." The man Dwight saw had been sitting outside my father's room for at least part of 2 days with 0 official permission to be in the building. Technically, he was trespassing. "Is he still here?" I asked. Ursula looked down the hallway toward room 412. "I saw him about 10 minutes ago. Same chair." We walked down the hallway together. The man was still there, mid-30s, navy jacket draped over the chair arm, khakis, brown leather loafers that looked Italian. He had a coffee cup in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. The posture of someone comfortable, waiting someone who'd done this before. He looked up when we approached, started to nod politely, the universal hospital acknowledgement between strangers keeping vigil. Then he registered Ursula's professional authority and my purposeful stride. His expression shifted from casual to cautious. "Are you family of Ernest Frost?" I asked. He stood up slowly. I was asked to keep an eye on him." Ursula's voice carried the professional edge of someone who'd dealt with unauthorized visitors before. "You're not on our volunteer roster. Do you have visitor authorization?" "Not exactly." "Then you need to explain what you're doing on this floor," Ursula said. The man looked at me, then at Ursula, then back at me. "Someone hired me. Through an app. $300 a day to sit with an elderly patient, check occasionally, be present. I was told the family worked long hours and needed someone reliable to maintain presence. $300 a day buys a lot of things. Coffee, newspaper. The performance of concern without the inconvenience of actually caring." "Who hired you?" I asked. He shifted his weight. "I got the request through TaskAlite. It's like TaskRabbit, but for longer-term jobs. The client specified 3 days, January 12th, 13th, 14th. $900 total paid up front through Venmo." "Show me the payment," I said. He hesitated for exactly 2 seconds, then pulled out his phone. Michael Torres, 36, sat with a folded newspaper and expensive coffee, wearing the kind of business casual outfit that signaled he had better places to be, but was being paid enough to wait. He opened his Venmo app and turned the screen toward me. "Transaction received $900. From at Adrienne MF. Date January 12th, 2025, 8:17 p.m. Memo fund expenses." I recognized the account immediately. Adrienne's secondary card, the one linked to her Meridian Education Partners Foundation work. She used it for catering orders, printing services, event supplies, anything categorized as operational expenses that could be filed under the foundation's budget. She'd categorized hiring a fake family member as fund expenses. "What exactly were you hired to do?" Ursula asked. Michael looked relieved to be answering a nurse instead of me. "Just be present. Walk past the room, occasionally sit nearby with coffee, look like concerned family. That's it. I wasn't supposed to interact with medical staff or the patient. Just be here." "For 3 days," I said. "Right. 8-hour shifts, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. I was told someone else would handle overnight, but I never saw them, because there was no one else. Just Michael performing presence during the hours when hospital staff would notice someone sitting vigil. Creating the appearance of a family that cared enough to be here, but not enough to sign emergency care authorization." "Did you ever speak to my father?" I asked. Michael shook his head. "No. I was specifically told not to enter the room or engage with him. Just maintain visible presence in the hallway." "How do you manufacture presence for someone who won't show up? You hire a stranger to sit in a chair and hold a coffee cup while your father-in-law fights for breath." "Were you given any instructions beyond sitting here?" Ursula asked. The app message said to look concerned if staff walked by, maybe read medical charts if they were visible from the hallway, not to touch them, just to appear like I was keeping informed. Professional presence without professional responsibility. I took a screenshot of the Venmo transaction with my phone. Michael didn't object. "You understand you've been trespassing," Ursula said. "I didn't know that. The job posting said all arrangements were cleared with the hospital. I assumed it was legitimate." "It wasn't," I said. and I'm the only family member authorized to be here. Michael looked at the coffee cup in his hand like it might explain how he'd ended up in this conversation. Look, I'm sorry, I thought I was helping someone who couldn't be here themselves. The money was good, the job seemed straightforward. Would you be willing to confirm this arrangement if asked? I said. Officially. He looked at the Venmo screen still open on his phone. I have the transaction record, the job posting, messages from the client. If you need proof, I can provide it. I need proof, I said. He nodded slowly. Then you have it. Ursula gestured toward the elevator. You need to leave the floor now. This hospital has policies about unauthorized visitors. Michael gathered his jacket and newspaper. As he walked past me toward the elevator, he said quietly, For what it's worth, your father seems like a good man. I hope he recovers. I didn't respond. The elevator doors closed on Michael Torres and his $900 of purchased concern. I stood in that hospital hallway, looking at a Venmo transaction on a stranger's phone, $900 from my wife's foundation card, to pay someone to pretend to care about my father for 72 hours. Not emergency spending, not panic decision planned, budgeted categorized as fund expenses, like catering or printing costs. 14 years of marriage, and I'd lived with someone capable of purchasing the appearance of family while the reality lay dying on a ventilator. I was beginning to understand what someone capable of this looked like. My phone buzzed at 10:47 a.m. with a text from Ursula. Someone downstairs waiting for you, says she knows you from Parent Association, needs to talk about the foundation. I stared at the message. I didn't know anyone from any Parent Association. Adrian handled all the Whitmore Academy social obligations, fundraising dinners, gala planning, parent networking events. I'd shown up to exactly 2 school functions in 14 years, both times because Adrian needed a +1 for optics. I texted back, I don't know any parents from Whitmore. What's the name? 3 dots appeared then. Celeste Cooper. Says it's urgent, about your wife and the school. Another thread pulling loose. I took the elevator to the first floor and found the waiting room. Celeste Cooper, 43, sat alone in the first floor waiting room wearing an old red puffy coat and gripping a thick manila folder like it contained the only evidence anyone might believe. Her eyes were already red, not crying now, but recently. She stood immediately when I approached. Mrs. Cooper, I'm Lawrence Frost. You asked to see me. I heard you're looking into the Meridian Foundation, into your wife. I kept my expression neutral. Who told you that? One of the nurses. I was here yesterday visiting my mother post-op recovery, 4th floor. I heard them talking about Ernest Frost and his family situation, about how you were reviewing security footage, asking questions. I thought maybe... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything, desperate hope mixed with the exhaustion of someone who'd told this story too many times to people who didn't help. Maybe I should sit down, I said. We sat in adjacent plastic chairs. The waiting room smelled like coffee and antiseptic. An elderly couple sat near the window, not talking. A man in scrubs scrolled through his phone by the vending machine. Celeste opened the folder with trembling hands. My daughter Nicolette, she's 13, 8th grade at Whitmore Academy. She pulled out a school photo, dark hair, careful smile, the kind of posed expression that schools require but don't capture real personality. She's been bullied since September by another student. Physical intimidation, social exclusion, online harassment through group chats. I looked at the photo, then at Celeste. What did the school do? I filed a formal complaint October 15th with the counseling office, documented everything, screenshots, witness names, dates. Principal Darren Stewart called me on October 28th, said the matter was being handled internally with appropriate discretion. And nothing changed. November came. Nicolette refused to eat for 3 weeks. She begged me not to send her back to school. There's a hierarchy of concerns that reveals character. Some people put children first, some put galas first. And the distance between those priorities is the distance between decency and corruption. 3 weeks, I repeated. Celeste's hands shook as she pulled another document from the folder. I kept calling the school, kept emailing. Finally, Stewart agreed to meet again. November 20th. He told me they were taking the matter seriously, investigating thoroughly, but these things take time. He asked me to be patient, to trust the process. Did you? I tried, but Nicolette kept getting worse. I took her to a therapist. The therapist asked if I'd reported the bullying. I said yes. The therapist said the school's delay was unacceptable. She handed me a printout. Email chain between Darren Stewart and Adrian Frost, November 5th to 12th, 2024. I read it twice. Stewart, November 5th. Celeste Cooper, complaint escalating. Student safety concern documented, but parent becoming vocal. Need guidance managing situation before this becomes public. Thoughts, Adrian, November 8th. Let's discuss offline. We need to settle this amicably before the January gala. Can't afford controversy during our primary fundraising campaign. We'll call you Monday. Stuart, November 12th. Agreed. We'll handle delicately. Appreciate the partnership. No mention of the child's name. No mention of investigating the bullying. No mention of student safety protocols or disciplinary action. Just gala timing and reputation management. I looked at Adriana's email signature. Adrian Frost, CEO, Meridian Education Partners Foundation. What kind of person reads 13-year-old refusing to eat for 3 weeks and thinks first about fundraising optics? How did you get this? I asked. Someone at the school felt bad, sent it anonymously to my email last week. No name, no explanation, just the attachment. Has anything happened since November? Celeste's voice broke slightly. Stuart called me December 3rd, said they'd completed their investigation, found the bullying claims were unsubstantiated due to insufficient corroborating evidence. Recommended we consider whether Whitmore was the right environment for Nicolette's social adjustment needs. They blamed your daughter. They suggested I withdraw her. I can't afford another private school. Public school registration closed in October. So Nicolette's still there, still being bullied, still barely eating. I looked at the folder on Celeste's lap. It was at least an inch thick. What else is in there? Screenshots, text messages, witness statements from other parents whose kids saw what happened, medical records from Nicolette's pediatrician documenting weight loss and anxiety, therapist notes, everything I thought might matter. She looked at me with eyes that had asked for help too many times without receiving it. Can you help? I don't know who else to ask. Your wife runs the foundation that funds the school. Principal Stewart coordinates with her. I saw the emails. They're protecting the reputation, not the students. And I heard you were looking into the foundation. I thought maybe... I looked at the email again. At Adrian's name. At the date November 8th, 2024. 6 weeks before Ernest's hospitalization. 8 weeks before I discovered everything. A 13-year-old had been refusing food while adults coordinated gala optics. Let me see what you have, I said. Everything in that folder. Celeste's breath caught. You'll actually look at it. I'll look at all of it. I sat in that hospital waiting room with Celeste Cooper's thick folder on my lap and realized this wasn't just about my father anymore, wasn't just about 14 years of marriage built on synchronized calendars and hotel elevator sounds. There was a 13-year-old girl who'd stopped eating because the adults around her prioritized a January gala over her safety. And the woman who'd made that calculation, who'd typed, "Settle this amicably before the fundraiser," while a child suffered, was the same woman I'd kissed goodbye 1,000 Tuesday mornings without seeing who she actually was. I needed to know exactly who she was. I called Sterling Fitzgerald from the hospital parking lot at 1:30 p.m. and said 6 words: I need a digital forensic analysis. Sterling didn't ask personal questions, just technical ones. What device? My wife's MacBook. I have family sharing admin access from 2019, never disabled. What timeline? Past 6 months, deleted files, calendar syncs, metadata reset logs, everything. I can be at your place in 45 minutes. Portable forensic kit. Are you ready to see what's been hidden? I looked at Celeste Cooper's folder on the passenger seat. I've already seen enough. I need to prove it. Sterling Fitzgerald, 34, arrived at my Greenwich house at 2:15 p.m. with a laptop bag and portable forensic drives, moving with the efficient focus of someone who'd spent a decade analyzing digital evidence and knew that metadata revealed truths people thought they'd erased. We went straight to my office. He set up at the second monitor, pulled out cables and external drives, booted terminal. The screen filled with white text on black file structures, timestamps, user logs, scrolling past faster than I could read. Family sharing gives me full file system access, Sterling said, fingers moving across the keyboard. She never disabled it. Never thought to. We set it up for photo syncing when she got an iPad for work. Domestic tech convenience. Domestic tech convenience just became your forensic backdoor. He typed a command I recognized from my IBM infrastructure days: recursive directory search with timestamp filtering, starting with trash recovery and metadata analysis. I pulled up my desk chair and watched the terminal window populate with deleted files. Hundreds of them. Photos, PDFs, text documents. Sterling ran filters, sorted by relevance, flagged anything created or modified in the past 6 months. Here, he said at 2:30 p.m. File called WA_incident_November 2024.pdf, deleted November 18th. He recovered the file and checked the metadata. Created by d.hale@meridian.org. That's her work email. Adrian Hale Frost. Meridian is the foundation. Sterling opened the PDF. Incident report from Iris Gomez, Whitmore Academy counselor. dated November 12, 2024. Subject, Nicolette Cooper, bullying documentation. I read it twice. Detailed timeline. September 15th, first incident reported by peer. September 22nd, second incident, physical intimidation. October 8th, online harassment screenshots. October 15th, parent complaint filed by Celeste Cooper. Recommendation, immediate intervention, mandatory counseling parent conference within 1 week. The file was deleted November 18th, 2 days before Stewart's email to Celeste saying the matter was handled internally. Digital files don't forget every deletion, leaves a shadow, every edit leaves a timestamp, every lie leaves metadata proving it was constructed, not accidental. Can you export this with full metadata, I asked? Sterling was already doing it. PDF with embedded creation date, author modification history, court-ready format. He kept working, running calendar analysis now, looking for hidden or secondary calendars. The screen shifted to a different view, calendar data structures, sync logs, shared account permissions. Found one, Sterling said. Secondary calendar hidden from default view, synced with external Google account. He pulled up the email address, leonierivera.mpp@yale.edu. Leonie Rivera, I said quietly. You know her. I know the name, from the messages. Sterling displayed the calendar entries. 17 events, September through December 2024. All evening times, all labeled vaguely meeting, discussion, check-in. Can you overlay my business calendar, I asked. He pulled up my Google Calendar in a split screen. My Albany trips, Boston audits, Hartford client sites, all marked in blue. Adrian's hidden calendar events in red. Perfect alignment, every single entry. September 18th, my Albany overnight, her meeting 8 p.m. October 12th, my Boston audit, her discussion 7:30. November 3rd, my Hartford client site, her check-in 9 p.m. 17 red dots, 17 blue dots, 0 mismatches. Visual proof of systematic coordination, Sterling said. Can you export this overlay? Already rendering it as PDF. What does it mean when someone deletes evidence 24 minutes before the phone rings, when preparation for deception happens before the question is even asked? One more thing, Sterling said. iCloud sync logs for January 12th. He pulled up a different terminal window. Scrolling through reset commands, authentication logs, sync timestamps. Here, 11:23:17 p.m. iCloud keychain, full reset. I looked at the timestamp. What does that reset? Everything. Saved passwords for hotel apps, browser autofill maps, location history calendar, push notifications. Requires two-factor authentication and manual password re-entry. This isn't accidental. This is deliberate data deletion. What time did the hospital call me? I already knew. I pulled up my call log anyway. 11:47 p.m., 24 minutes. She'd reset her iCloud keychain 24 minutes before the hospital called me about Ernest. Not after I called her, not during the crisis, before. She knew the hospital would call. She knew I would call her. And she deleted evidence before either phone rang. Sterling looked at me. Metadata doesn't lie. People delete things reactively when they panic. They delete things proactively when they plan. And this was proactive. 24 minutes proactive. I stood up and walked to the window. Greenwich Avenue looked the same as it had this morning, same houses, same trees, same mailboxes. But I was seeing it differently now, seeing 14 years differently. Behind me, Sterling's keyboard kept clicking. I'm exporting everything with full forensic metadata, creation dates, deletion dates, sync logs, calendar overlays. You'll have a complete timeline of digital evidence. How long? 20 minutes. Do you want me to keep looking, or is this enough? I turned back to the monitors. 3 screens showing 17 synchronized calendar entries, a deleted incident report about a bullied child, and an iCloud reset executed 24 minutes before my father's hospital called me. That's enough, I said. Sterling packed his forensic kit and said what I'd known for 25 years of systems engineering but had never applied to my own marriage. Humans lie with words, but computers don't lie with timestamps. And every timestamp on that screen told the same story. My wife hadn't reacted to crisis. She'd architected deception in advance, building systems of betrayal as deliberately as I'd once built server infrastructure. Every system has a financial trail. I called Otis Gallagher at 4:15 p.m. and said I needed to review our family financial accounts for irregularities, and he replied with 4 words that made my stomach drop. I've been expecting this. He gave me his office address, Trumbull Street, Hartford, 8th floor, 30 minutes. Otis Gallagher, 51, sat in his 8th floor office overlooking Bushnell Park with a spreadsheet already open on his monitor, wearing the carefully neutral expression of a financial advisor who'd been watching questionable transactions for 3 months and waiting for his client to ask the right questions. I sat down across from his desk. Through the window behind him, January light made the bare trees in the park look skeletal. You said you've been expecting this call. Since November, I saw transactions that didn't make sense, foundation accounts that looked legitimate on paper but felt wrong in practice. But I needed to be sure before approaching you. Are you sure now? I'm sure enough that I've had this spreadsheet ready for 2 months. He turned the monitor toward me. Excel columns, transaction dates, account numbers, wire transfer records. Clean rows of data that told a dirty story. 3 wire transfers, Otis said. September, October, November 2024. 500,000, 600,000, 400,000. Total $1.5 million. I stared at the numbers. From whom? Murray Callahan. Real estate developer. Callahan Properties, LLC. And before you ask, yes, he has a child at Whitmore Academy. The name meant nothing to me, but the dates did. September 15th, October 22nd, November 8th. What's the recipient account? I asked. Meridian Education Partners, LLC, established July 2024, registered agent D. Hale. Adrienne's maiden name. Show me everything, I said. Otis pulled up the LLC registration documents. Meridian Education Partners, LLC, nonprofit, educational partnership, tax-exempt status pending. Board of Directors, one name. Adrienne Frost. What has this LLC funded? I asked. Nothing. 0 educational programs, 0 grants, 0 disbursements, $1.5 million sitting in an account earning interest. Some things shouldn't have price tags. Children's safety, truth, basic human decency. But everything has a price when someone wealthy enough wants something badly enough to pay for silence. Pull up the transaction dates again, I said. Next to them, I need you to write these dates. I pulled out my phone and opened the notes where I'd documented Celeste's timeline. September 8th, Nicolette's bullying began. October 15th, Celeste filed formal complaint. November 8th, Adrienne emailed Principal Stewart about settling before the gala. Otis typed the dates into adjacent columns. September 8th, bullying began. September 15th, $500,000 wire transfer from Callahan. October 15th, formal complaint filed. October 22nd, $600,000 wire transfer from Callahan. November 8th, Adrienne's settle amicably email. November 8th, $400,000 wire transfer from Callahan. Same day. These aren't donations following events, I said. These are payments coordinating silence. I know, Otis said quietly. That's why I've been waiting. Murray Callahan's child is the one who bullied Nicolette Cooper. Yes. And he paid my wife $1.5 million to make the complaint disappear. That's what the pattern suggests. I looked at the spreadsheet. Clean columns, perfect accounting, precise documentation of something fundamentally corrupt. The memo lines, I said. What do they say? Otis clicked to expand the transaction details. All 3 transfers had identical memo text, educational partnership development. Partnership development, I repeated. Standard nonprofit language. Sounds legitimate, means nothing specific. But it's actually payment for suppressing a bullying case involving a 13-year-old girl who stopped eating for 3 weeks. Otis's jaw tightened. I have a daughter. She's 11. When I saw these transactions in November and started connecting them to the Whitmore timeline, I wanted to call you immediately, but financial advisors can't make accusations without evidence. So I waited and documented. What can't be bought with $1.5 million? Apparently not a headmaster's cooperation, not a foundation CEO's ethics, not the institutional machinery designed to protect children. This is money laundering, I said. Yes. Through a nonprofit shell company Adrienne created specifically for this purpose. The timing suggests that LLC established in July, first payment in September. Either she anticipated needing a mechanism for large, questionable transfers, or Murray Callahan approached her about handling a problem and she built the structure to accommodate it. Either way, she knew what she was doing. This isn't accidental, Otis said. This is architecture. I sat back in the chair. Through the window, I could see office workers leaving buildings, heading home after normal workdays, solving normal problems. None of them were looking at spreadsheets showing how their wife had monetized a child's suffering. $1.5 million, I said. That's what a 13-year-old's safety was worth. To Murray Callahan, yes. His child gets to stay at Whitmore. Nicolette Cooper's complaint gets labeled unsubstantiated. Everyone moves on except the family that was hurt. And Adrienne gets $1.5 million in a shell company account. Tax-exempt pending nonprofit status. I thought about Celeste's red eyes, the thick folder, the therapist notes documenting Nicolette's weight loss and anxiety. What do you need from me? Otis asked. Everything. Full transaction records, LLC registration documents, wire transfer confirmations, bank statements showing the money sitting unused, everything that proves this trail. Otis opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. I've been ready since November. He handed it across the desk. I opened it. 30 pages of transaction records, account statements, LLC documents, wire transfer confirmations. Every piece of evidence showing how Adrian had built a non-profit shell company to launder payment from a bully's wealthy father. "Can I ask what you're planning to do with this?" Otis said. "I'm planning to make sure everyone involved understands exactly what they did." Otis nodded slowly. "If you need me to testify to any of this, I will." "I might? Then I'm ready." I walked out of Otis's office with a folder containing every transaction record, every wire transfer, every piece of evidence showing how my wife had built a non-profit shell company to launder $1.5 million from a bully's father while a 13-year-old girl stopped eating. The spreadsheet showed precise dates, perfect accounting, clean documentation of something fundamentally corrupt. And somewhere in Greenwich, Adrian was probably preparing for tomorrow's foundation meeting, organizing the January gala. She'd sacrificed a child to protect, completely unaware that her financial advisor had been building a case against her since November. She didn't know anyone was building a case. I did. I woke at 5:30 a.m. on January 15th after 3 hours of broken sleep, made coffee I barely tasted, and taped a sheet of A0 paper to my office wall because 25 years as a systems engineer taught me one thing: you can't debug what you can't visualize. The paper stretched 4 feet wide, 3 feet tall. Engineering graph paper with faint blue grid lines. I taped each corner, carefully pulled it taut, made sure it was level. This wasn't decorative. This was infrastructure. I pulled 3 markers from my desk drawer: black Sharpie for primary data, red fine point for contradictions, blue medium tip for financial transactions. My laptop sat open beside the paper, showing timeline.txt 12 entries now growing every time I discovered something new. Second monitor displayed Otis's spreadsheet with the Callahan payments highlighted in yellow. Third monitor showed Sterling's metadata report timestamps and deletion logs in white text on black background. Third cup of coffee sat untouched on the desk. My hair was uncombed. I was wearing yesterday's clothes. None of that mattered. I was preparing to map infrastructure. 72 hours. January 12th at 10 p.m. to January 15th at 10 p.m. 3 full days. 3 data streams: hospital events, Adrian's movements, financial transactions. Map it, see it, prove it. I uncapped the black Sharpie and drew a horizontal timeline across the top of the A0 paper. Marked it in 6-hour intervals. Tuesday 10 p.m., Wednesday 4 a.m., Wednesday 10 a.m., Wednesday 4 p.m., Wednesday 10 p.m., Thursday, Friday. Black marker first. Hospital events, the backbone of truth. 22, January 15th, 12, Ernest admitted Hartford Hospital, ER, respiratory failure. 23:47, hospital calls Lawrence, I-84 Albany return trip. 00:34, January 13th. Lawrence arrives ER, signs emergency care authorization. Adrienne not present despite claim. 07:50, Lawrence reviews security footage. Adrienne's visit documented 6 minutes 14 seconds. I kept writing. Morning rounds, medication adjustments, stability improvements. Dwight Diaz's witness statement. Michael Torres hired presence discovery. Every hospital event cataloged in black ink, creating a timeline that couldn't be disputed because it was documented by institutional record. There's a difference between knowing something and seeing it. Knowledge lives in your head where you can ignore it, but vision lives on the wall where it stares back until you acknowledge every uncomfortable truth. I capped the black marker and picked up the red one. Red for Adrian, red for contradictions, red for lies. 22 January 9th, 12. A arrives, Hartford Hospital security footage, timestamp from Derek Walsh. 22:11 A takes selfie with sleeping Ernest, visible in camera footage. Dwight confirms phone raised. 22:15-17 A departs hospital, total visit time 6 minutes 14 seconds. 23:23 iCloud keychain reset, executed Sterling's metadata log. 24 minutes before hospital calls Lawrence. 23:47 A answers Lawrence's call. Claims, "I'm here, Lawrence, I'm with him right now." I wrote that last part in red capital letters, the central lie, the one that started everything. I kept going down the timeline. January 30, 2013. A still absent from hospital, no return visit. 7 o'clock, a still absent, Lawrence waking in plastic chair. 1400 A, presumably at foundation office, unconfirmed, no visual verification. Evening, A at home, briefly minimal conversation, early to bed, exhausted from hospital stress. I understand serious. Every red mark contradicted what she'd told me. Every claimed location had countervailing evidence. The pattern was clear even before I finished. I picked up the blue marker. Blue for money, blue for the transactions that funded the lies. But the financial timeline extended further back than 72 hours, so I added a second axis on the left side of the paper. Vertical timeline going back to September 2024. September 15th. Callahan Properties, LLC wire transfer. $500,000 to Meridian Education Partners, LLC. 1 week after Nicolette's bullying began. October 22nd, second wire transfer. $600,000. 1 week after Celeste filed formal complaint. November 8th, third wire transfer. $400,000. Same day, Adrienne emailed Principal Stewart about settling amicably before the gala. Total $1,500,000. Then back to the 72-hour timeline. January 12, 2017. Venmo, payment to Michael Torres, $900. Memo fund expenses, 2 hours before Ernest's admission. She'd hired fake family presents before the crisis even started. What does it mean when you spend 25 years building systems for corporations and never notice you're living inside one designed by the person who sleeps beside you? I stepped back from the wall. 3 colors, 72 hours, 6 months of financial context. Black showed institutional truth, hospital records, security footage, metadata, timestamps. Undisputable documentation. Red showed systematic deception, every claim Adrienne made contradicted by physical evidence. Not mistakes, deliberate lies coordinated across multiple channels. Blue showed financial architecture payments aligned with crisis points, my business trips, her operational needs. Not scattered transactions, systematic funding of deception infrastructure. I looked at the overlapping patterns. Every time I traveled to Albany or Boston, my calendar going back months, there was a corresponding foundation meeting on Adrienne's hidden calendar, Sterling's forensic recovery. Every time Murray Callahan made a payment to the LLC, it aligned with a critical moment in Nicolette's bullying timeline, Otis's spreadsheet. Every time Adrienne needed to construct an alibi or hire external support, there was a corresponding financial transaction within hours: Torres payment, hotel charges, restaurant receipts. Not coincidence, not panic, not mistakes. System architecture as deliberate as anything I designed at IBM. Load balancing, redundancy, fail-safe protocols. She'd built it the same way I built server infrastructure, with backups, with contingencies, with careful attention to what could be monitored and what could be hidden. For 14 years, I'd lived inside this system without seeing it. I'd been a component, the traveling engineer whose absence created operational windows, whose trust created permission structures, whose technical knowledge paradoxically made him easier to deceive because he trusted systems more than suspicions. I stood 3 feet back from the A0 paper and saw 72 hours in 3 colors: black truth, red lies, blue money. Every absence aligned with hotel time. Every financial transaction aligned with my business trips or her crisis management. Not coincidence, not panic, not mistakes. System architecture as deliberate as anything I'd designed at IBM. For 14 years, I'd lived inside infrastructure built to prevent me from seeing its own structure. Today, standing in front of that wall with uncombed hair and cold coffee, I saw every circuit clearly. Seeing the circuits meant understanding which ones to trace. I sent the text at 8:30 a.m. from my Greenwich office. I am Lawrence Frost. I think you know why I'm texting. Blue State Coffee, 10 a.m. And watched 3 dots appear, disappear, reappear for 6 minutes before her reply came. I'll be there. I drove to New Haven through morning I-95 traffic. 45 minutes thinking about what I knew. Leonie Rivera, 23, Yale MPP candidate, Meridian intern. 17 calendar entries synced with Adrienne. Not the architect, a component. I parked on Chapel Street at 9:50 a.m. and sat for 8 minutes. She wasn't the enemy. She was 23 and caught in something bigger than she'd understood. Approach like debugging, understand the system before judging the component. I walked into Blue State Coffee at 9:58 a.m. Leonie Rivera, 23, sat in the corner of Blue State Coffee wearing a Yale hoodie and holding a latte she hadn't touched, her black hair pulled into a messy ponytail and her eyes carrying the weight of someone who'd spent too many nights knowing something she wished she didn't. She stood when I approached, looked directly at me with something between defiance and shame. Before I could speak, I truly love her. I want you to know that first. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled around the coffee cup. I sat down. I know, that's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? I leaned forward, kept my voice quiet. Do you know about Nicolette Cooper? Beat. Her face shifted. Recognition. She looked down at her latte, didn't answer. I waited. 15 seconds of silence. Students walked past laughing. The espresso machine hissed. Someone's phone buzzed. When Leonie looked up, her eyes were red at the corners. Yes. You know and stayed silent, or you know and don't know what to do. Her hands tightened around the cup until her knuckles went white. Love doesn't make complicity disappear, it just makes the math harder. Turns moral clarity into emotional fog where you can't see the child suffering because the person you love is standing in the way. I saw the email, Leonie said quietly. November. Between Adrian and Principal Stewart. I was filing foundation correspondence. It said they needed to settle the Cooper complaint before the January gala. That controversy during fundraising would be problematic. And you didn't say anything. To whom I'm a 23-year-old intern. Adrienne is the CEO. Who was I supposed to tell? Celeste Cooper, Nicolette's mother. Leonie looked away. I know. When did you realize it wasn't just administrative? December. I saw the payment confirmation from Callahan Properties, $600,000. Memo said Educational Partnership Development, but I'd never heard of them. So I looked them up. Murray Callahan's daughter is in Nicolette's grade at Whitmore. She said it like a confession. I'm 23 years old, Leonie said, voice breaking slightly. I'm scared. Not an excuse, a statement of fact. Scared of what? Of losing everything, my program, my future. Adrian wrote my Yale recommendation. If this becomes public, if I'm involved, I lose the recommendation, maybe my place in the program. Legally, I don't know if I'm complicit just by seeing the emails. I don't know what happens to me. She took a breath, and I'm afraid of losing her. I know a child is suffering, and I'm worried about my relationship. But I truly love her. I don't know if that makes me weak or complicit or just 23 and stupid. I let the silence sit. What matters more at 23, protecting the person you love from consequences or protecting a child you've never met from institutional betrayal? I'm not asking you to betray Adrienne for me, I said. Leonie looked up. Then what are you asking? Choose for Nicolette Cooper, 13 years old, bullied since September, stopped eating for 3 weeks. That's who this decision is about. I paused. You don't choose between me and Adrienne. You choose between staying quiet while a child suffers or doing what you know is right. That difference matters. Leonie stared at me. Tears finally broke through the careful control. I don't know if I'm brave enough, she whispered. You came here this morning. That took courage. Coming here is different from telling the truth, from protecting a child. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. What happens if I help you? I don't know. That depends on what you have and what you choose to do with it. And if I don't, then Nicolette stays at a school where adults covered up her bullying for money, and you stay with someone who taught you that love means protecting her instead of protecting children. That's the system you choose to live in. I pulled out my phone, opened a new contact, typed my number. I'm giving you my number. Call me when you decide what kind of person you want to be at 23. Not today, not tomorrow necessarily, when you know. I stood up. Leonie looked at the number on her phone, then at me. You're not going to pressure me. No. Why not? Because the choice only means something if it's yours. Choose for Nicolette, not for me. That difference matters. I left Leonie sitting at that table with her untouched latte and red eyes, gave her my number. Told her to call when she decided what kind of person she wanted to be at 23. Didn't ask for timeline, didn't pressure, didn't threaten, just reframed the choice from betray the woman I love to protect a child being crushed by institutional corruption. Walking back to my truck on Chapel Street, I didn't know if she'd call, but I knew I'd given her something. Adrienne never had the truth about what choosing silence actually costs. My phone vibrated against the hospital corridor wall. Sterling Fitzgerald's name flashed on the screen. I'd expected his call. Forensic analysis takes time, but not this soon. 48 hours felt impossibly short for the deep dive I'd requested. Sterling, I answered, keeping my voice low. Lawrence. His breathing was uneven. I need you to sit down for this. I was already sitting, having slid down the wall during Dwight's account. I'm sitting. Good, because what I found... He paused. It's not what she deleted, Lawrence, it's when. The distinction landed like a punch. Investigators think in what? Engineers think in when sequence timeline cascade of cause and effect. Sterling was speaking my language. The iCloud keychain reset, I said. You recovered the timestamp. 11:23 p.m., January 12th. 24 minutes before Hartford Hospital called your cell phone to report your father's condition had deteriorated. I watched the numbers on the opposite wall, room 317, blur and refocus. 24 minutes. Not panic, not damage control. Premeditated deletion while Ernest was dying 3 floors above, executed before I'd received any notification that would justify such measures. She knew, I said quietly. The room number reflected in my phone's black screen doubled and inverted. Before the hospital called me, she already knew. Or she'd already decided what needed to disappear regardless of outcome. Sterling's tone shifted into expert testimony precision. The deletion protocol was thorough enterprise-grade sanitization. 7-pass overwrite on the authentication tokens. She scorched the earth. Thoroughness reveals intent. Overkill is a signature. What could she have needed to hide badly enough to risk that digital footprint? She missed something. Email drafts sync to iCloud differently than sent messages they cache locally, even after cloud deletion if the device hasn't completed a full sync cycle. Her laptop was in sleep mode when she executed the reset from her phone. I straightened against the wall. You recovered drafts. One draft. Composed at 10:47 p.m. on January 12th. Recipient Desmond Mercer. Ernest's estate attorney. Subject line, Nicolette contingency legal exposure minimization. The hallway contracted around me. 10:47 p.m., 36 minutes before she'd purged her digital life. An hour before the hospital had called. While Ernest was coding in room 412, Adrian had been composing legal strategy about erasing a 14-year-old child from his will. Family betrayal forces impossible choices. When the people you trust weaponize that trust, the damage compounds across generations. If you've faced systematic deception by those closest to you or watched someone you love navigate that minefield, you know evidence doesn't heal, but it does clarify. Sometimes clarity is the only foundation left to rebuild on. Read me the body, I said. Sterling's voice flattened. Desmond timeline accelerating per our discussion. If subject executes codicil modification favoring minor beneficiary as threatened, will need immediate competency challenge framework. Requesting draft petition questioning testamentary capacity based on documented cognitive decline. Medical records from Ursula Valencia should support diminished decision-making. Need filing ready within 72 hours of any modification. Retainer authorization attached. I closed my eyes. The architecture of betrayal was complete. Not just theft, systematic legal groundwork to erase Nicolette Cooper's protection before Ernest could establish it. The money laundering, the affair with Leonie, the cruelty to the child, all connected to this central objective. Prevent Ernest from redirecting any portion of his $8.4 million estate away from Adrienne's control. The retainer authorization, I said, amount, $50,000, paid from the Foundation's discretionary fund on January 8th, 4 days before Ernest's collapse. This wasn't contingency planning. This was battlefield preparation. A nurse rounded the corner pushing a medication cart. I stood reflexively, phone still pressed to my ear. She nodded politely and continued past wheels squeaking against linoleum. Sterling, can you authenticate this chain of custody for court? Already documented. The draft's metadata is intact composition timestamp device ID typing pattern analysis. It'll stand. I looked toward room 412 where Ernest had fought for consciousness long enough to tell me about the child who'd stolen his heart. He'd known Adrienne would fight his final act of decency with every weapon at her disposal. There's one more thing, Sterling said quietly. The attached medical records she referenced from Ursula Valencia, I checked the timestamp metadata. They were generated and attached to this draft at 10:51 p.m., 4 minutes after she started writing. He let that sink in. Lawrence, she already had a nurse on staff prepared to falsify cognitive assessments of your father before he was even gone. The hallway tilted. Not just legal strategy, suborning medical testimony to destroy a dying man's last wish. Send me everything, I said. Complete forensic report, chain of custody documentation, the draft with full metadata. I need it before I confront her. Lawrence, Sterling's voice carried warning. If she knew enough to scrub her iCloud at 11:23 p.m., someone tipped her that you were investigating. She's already in defensive mode. Confrontation now could what she's already paid an estate attorney to challenge my father's mental competence. She's already leveraged his dying hours to eliminate a child from his will. What exactly am I preserving by waiting? Silence. Then, your safety. People who plan this methodically don't improvise well when cornered. I thought about Nicolette Cooper, 14 years old, standing in a parking lot while my wife orchestrated her erasure. Thought about Ernest fighting morphine confusion to whisper a little girl's name. Thought about Leonie Rivera, 23, deployed as a weapon in whatever larger game Adrienne was playing. Send the files, I repeated. I'll handle the timing. I disconnected before he could argue further. The phone's weight in my hand felt different now, not a communication device, but a repository of evidence that would detonate my marriage and possibly destroy what remained of my father's legacy. But Sterling had been right about one thing. It wasn't what Adrienne had tried to hide. It was when she'd tried to hide it. 24 minutes before crisis, an hour of legal preparation before tragedy, days of retainer payments before collapse. This wasn't reaction, this was execution of a plan. And I was standing in the same building where she'd set it in motion, about to walk into room 412 and pretend I didn't know my wife had been counting down the hours until my father's death gave her the opening to erase a child's last chance at protection. I spread 11 manila folders across Desmond Mercer's conference table, each labeled with a name, a date, a dollar amount. My wife planned this while our father was dying. Desmond stood at the window of his Capitol Avenue office, backlit by late afternoon sun that turned Hartford's skyline into silhouette. He'd been Ernest's estate attorney for 23 years. Now he was something else, the man who would decide whether family loyalty outweighed professional ethics. He turned from the window and approached the table without speaking. His hands moved methodically, arranging folders in chronological order: Vernon Townsend's witness statement, security footage, stills from Whitmore Academy, text message logs between Adrian and Leonie Rivera, keycard access records, the financial spreadsheet from Otis Gallagher showing $1.5 million laundered through Meridian Education Partners Sterling Fitzgerald's forensic timeline. I saved the last folder for impact. Sterling recovered this from Adrian's laptop cache. Draft email, January 12, 10:47 p.m. Desmond opened the folder. I watched his face as he read the recipient field. "She wrote to you," I said quietly. Subject line, Nicolette Contingency Legal Exposure Minimization. His jaw tightened. "I never received this. She never sent it. But she drafted it while Dad was in the ICU planning to challenge his mental competence. She was going to ask you, his own attorney, to help erase a child from his will." Desmond set the folder down carefully as if it might detonate. "She assumed I wouldn't see the conflict, or that I'd prioritize her. Would you have—" "No," the word was flat final. "But the fact she thought I might tells me how deeply she's miscalculated everyone around her." He pulled out a chair and sat reaching for the first folder. "I need 15 minutes. Don't speak." I watched him read. Every document, every screenshot, every witness statement received the same methodical attention. His pen moved across a legal pad, making notations in handwriting I couldn't decipher from across the table. 3 items got circled: the $1.5 million Meridian transfer, the trust exclusion language for Nicolette Cooper, and Sterling's timestamp showing Adrian's iCloud deletion at 11:23 p.m., 24 minutes before the hospital called me. The wall clock ticked through 15 minutes of silence. Outside the window, traffic noise rose and fell. Inside, the only sound was paper sliding across mahogany and pens scratching against pad. Desmond arranged the evidence folders like puzzle pieces, each document a fragment of intent together, forming a portrait of premeditated betrayal my wife had composed. One email, one deletion, one lie at a time. Finally, he looked up. "This is wire fraud conspiracy to commit fraud and possibly RICO if the foundation pattern holds across multiple incidents. Can we prove it? We can document it. Proving it is the prosecutor's job." He stood and moved to the whiteboard mounted on the far wall, uncapping a blue marker. 4-point strategy. First, evidence preservation letters sent today to Whitmore Academy and Meridian Education Partners. No destruction of records, immediate compliance, federal penalty warnings. He wrote preservation in block letters. Second, emergency trust amendment protecting your father's original intent regarding Nicolette Cooper. If he's still competent to sign, we execute it tomorrow. If not, we document his expressed wishes with medical witnesses. Amendment joined preservation on the board. Third, IRS referral for Meridian LLC suspicious activity. The $1.5 million transfer triggers mandatory reporting thresholds. I file Form 3949-A citing potential tax fraud and money laundering. IRS referral. Fourth. He turned to face me, marker still in hand. "You do nothing visible. Don't confront her. Don't hint. Don't apologize for distance. Radio silence. She'll know something's wrong. Let her wonder." Desmond capped the marker. "Wondering makes people reckless. Reckless people make mistakes. We need her mistakes on record." I stared at the whiteboard, at the clinical architecture of legal warfare. What happens when she retaliates? She'll weaponize family relationships, claim you're mentally unstable from grief, possibly attempt emergency guardianship over Ernest to freeze estate decisions. He sat back down, meeting my eyes. "This legal battle will destroy your family regardless of outcome." "She destroyed it already," I said quietly. "This is just documenting the rubble." Desmond nodded. "Correct. And documentation is everything, which brings us to witness reliability. What if Leonie doesn't cooperate? What if Vernon recants? Then we have circumstantial fraud instead of testimonial fraud. Still prosecutable." He tapped the folders. "The timeline is objective. Bank records don't recant. Security footage doesn't change its story. Digital forensics don't suffer memory failure." "You're saying I don't need everyone." "You need the timeline. People are corroboration, not foundation." He pulled Otis's spreadsheet from its folder. Dwight confirming the parking lot call. Iris confirming the deletion email she sent you. Otis confirming the financial spreadsheet. Sterling confirming the iCloud reset timestamp. Each person doing one small ethical act creates an unbreakable chain. I felt something shift in my chest. Not hope exactly, but clarity. The engineer in me recognized the principle: redundant systems, independent verification, fault tolerance through distributed responsibility. I realized I'd been holding my breath, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar sensation of having an ally who believed me without requiring emotional performance, just evidence. I don't need everyone to do anything, I said slowly. Just each person to do one right thing. Correct. Desmond leaned back in his chair. And Adrian needed everyone to do nothing. That asymmetry is her weakness. Silence requires unanimous complicity. Truth only requires one person willing to speak. His phone buzzed on the table between us. He glanced at the screen and his expression went carefully neutral. What? He turned the phone so I could see. Email received 4:26 p.m. Sender Adrian Frost. Subject emergency family matter re Lawrence. He opened it and read aloud. Desmond. I'm concerned about my husband's mental state since our father's hospitalization. He's making bizarre accusations about Dad's care and my professional conduct. I think we need to discuss guardianship options before he does something harmful to himself or others. Can we meet tomorrow morning? This is urgent. Adrienne. I checked my watch. 4:30 p.m. The email had been sent 4 minutes ago. 4 minutes ago, I'd still been in this office unpacking evidence folders. Before I'd confronted anyone, before I'd done anything visible. She's already moving, I said. She's already been moving. Desmond set the phone down. The question is, who told her you were building a case? The PTA president sitting across from me at Mac's downtown was trembling. Not from cold, but from the kind of fear that comes from realizing you've been complicit in something federal. Lyle Hewitt had arrived early, chosen a corner booth, ordered coffee he wasn't drinking. Mid-40s, thinning hair, wedding ring, catching overhead light. Whitmore Academy's PTA president, father of 2, married, 16 years mortgage in West Hartford. The kind of biographical detail people offer when they have too much to lose. I need to make sure my name isn't dragged into whatever's happening between you and your wife, he said. I stayed silent. Desmond had taught me, let people fill silence with truth. Adrian called me at 5 o'clock today. His fingers tightened around the cup. She asked me to prepare testimony that the donation was legitimate and properly documented, that I verified the LLC paperwork, that Nicolette Cooper is a real student enrolled at Whitmore. What did you tell her? I said I'd think about it. He looked down. Then I called you. Why? Lyle pulled his phone from his jacket and placed it on the table between us. Because I recorded the conversation. When someone asks you to lie under oath, you document it. I felt something shift. The sensation of discovering a critical component you'd thought was missing had been there all along, just mislabeled. Can I hear it? He unlocked the phone and pressed play. Adrian's voice filled the space between us, clear and unmistakable. Lyle, I need you to confirm something if anyone asks. The January donation from Meridian Education Partners. If Lawrence or anyone from the estate asks you, confirm the donation was legitimate, properly documented, and that Nicolette Cooper is enrolled. Lyle's recorded voice uncertain. I'd need to check our records. Adrian cutting him off. The records are fine. I just need you to confirm what's already there. Lawrence is under stress from Dad's condition. He's making accusations that aren't grounded in reality. Lyle stopped the playback. There's 2 minutes more. She mentions your name 4 times, the amount 3 times. Can you send me that file? Already did. Check your email. He pocketed the phone. But I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this because I'm brave. I'm doing this because I can't make the same mistake twice. I leaned forward. What mistake? Last year, Reeves Foundation. His voice dropped. Same pattern. Adrian asked me to verify a grant was legitimate. I said yes, signed an affidavit. 4 months later, I learned the grant was fraudulent. The family doesn't exist. The money disappeared. The restaurant noise faded to background static. You have documentation from last year? No, but I remember the amount. $890,000. Nearly $1 million. A year ago. Different family, same method, same institution. This wasn't isolated fraud. This was systematic money laundering using Whitmore Academy as the mechanism. I realized evidence accumulation worked like my old systems engineering projects, each component meaningless alone, but together forming architecture that either collapses or holds under scrutiny. Adrienne had built hers to collapse. I need you to write down everything you remember about Reeves Foundation, I said. Names, dates, amounts. Lyle nodded. I'll send it tonight. We left separately. I drove to Hartford Hospital parking lot where Vernon Townsend was waiting by his Subaru at 8 o'clock. You said you wanted more details about the man with your wife, Vernon said, pulling a notebook from his coat. Navy jacket, yes, but also brown leather shoes. Distinctive stitching along the sole. Italian, maybe. My son wears the same brand, expensive. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo Dwight had sent me. Michael Torres, 36, hired actor. Is this the man? Vernon studied the image under the parking lot light. That's him. Same face, same height, I'm certain. Would you testify to that? Already planning to. He closed his notebook. Your father was a good man. Adrienne isn't. I drove to Pearl Street and parked, needing to walk, needing to think. The sidewalk was empty at 8:30 p.m. Storefronts, lit but closed. I played Lyle's audio file again, listening to Adrienne request perjury in clinical, professional tones. Dwight saw Michael Torres at the cart return. Vernon saw him in the parking lot with brown leather shoes. Lyle recorded Adrienne soliciting false testimony. Reeves' foundation proved systematic pattern. Sterling's forensics proved premeditation. Otis's spreadsheet proved the money trail. I didn't need Adrienne to confess. I needed the evidence to speak. Standing on Pearl Street, I noticed my reflection in a storefront window, same face as 4 days ago, but the expression was different. Not grief-hollowed anymore. Purpose sharpened instead. I breathed normally for the first time since January 12th, not because the crisis was over, but because the path forward was clear. Scattered fragments had coalesced into certainty. The investigation phase was complete. What came next was confrontation. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Lawrence, a woman's voice, young, shaking. This is Leonie Rivera. We met at the hospital. I stopped walking. I remember. I made my decision. I want to help. I'll testify about everything, the affair, the money, what she asked me to do. Her breath caught. But she just called me 20 minutes ago. What did she say? That if I speak to you, I'll be deported to El Salvador within 72 hours. That she knows people at ICE. That my visa status doesn't matter. She can make calls. Leonie's voice cracked. My visa is legitimate. I have nothing to hide. But Lawrence, can she actually do that? The sidewalk tilted beneath me. The evidence was complete. The witnesses were willing. The path was clear. Except Adrienne wasn't just hiding fraud anymore. She was threatening a 23-year-old graduate student with state violence to maintain her cover. The cost of using this evidence had just become human. Don't answer if she calls again, I said. I'll handle this. But as I disconnected, I wasn't certain what handling it meant or whether the 72-hour clock Adrienne had started was already running out. I found the gala organizer in the Delamar Greenwich Harbor lobby arranging nameplates alphabetically. Adrienne Frost's card, positioned between foundation donors and guest speaker, and realized this was where it ended. 5 days since Leonie's call. 5 days spent coordinating with Desmond to secure immigration attorney protection for a 23-year-old graduate student my wife had threatened with deportation. 5 days building the case while Adrienne accelerated her plans. Now I was 40 miles from Hartford, standing in a luxury hotel lobby watching a stranger position my wife's name at the head table of her own foundation's annual gala. The woman adjusting the nameplates was late 30s, efficient movements, burgundy blazer tablet under one arm. She cross-referenced the seating chart against a donor list, making millimeter adjustments to card placement. Professional event management, the kind of precision that came from years of making other people's reputations look flawless. I approached before I could second-guess the decision. Stella Jarvis. She looked up, polite smile already in place. Yes, I'm Lawrence Frost, Adrienne's husband. I need 5 minutes of your time. The smile held, but her eyes sharpened with recognition. The gala is in 3 days, Mr. Frost. If this is personal, I'm not the right person. It's about protecting everyone at that gala who doesn't deserve what's coming. She set down the nameplate she'd been holding. Coffee, hotel restaurant, 5 minutes. We sat in a corner booth away from the lobby traffic. I pulled out my phone and opened the files I'd organized specifically for this conversation. Lyle Hewitt's recording, Sterling Fitzgerald's forensic timestamps, Otis Gallagher's financial spreadsheet. Not Leonie, not the immigration threats, not the personal devastation, just the institutional fraud, clean, documentable, prosecutable. Before you speak, Stella said, I need to be clear. I've managed high-profile events for 15 years. I know when family drama is about to walk through my door and explode in public. Whatever this is, I'm not choosing sides. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I pressed play on Lyle's recording. I'm asking you to look at the documents. Adrienne's voice filled the small space between us. Same clinical tone I'd heard on Pearl Street 5 nights ago, requesting Lyle confirm false testimony about the Meridian donation, Nicolette Cooper's enrollment, the legitimacy of documentation that didn't exist. Stella's expression shifted from professional neutrality to something harder. That's her voice. I've worked with her for 2 years. This is Sterling Fitzgerald's digital forensics report. I slid the tablet across the table. Timestamp showing Adrienne executed iCloud deletion at 11:23 p.m. on January 12th, 24 minutes before the hospital called about my father. Premeditated evidence destruction. Stella scrolled through the report, her finger pausing on key timestamps. This is Otis Gallagher's financial analysis. The Meridian LLC transfer $1.5 million laundered through Whitmore Academy using a child who doesn't exist as the paper trail. She read for 90 seconds without speaking. When she looked up, the professional mask was gone. If this comes out at the gala, it destroys sponsors who have nothing to do with this. 60 donors, most of them legitimate educational foundations. Uncontrolled public exposure will damage people who've done nothing wrong. I want the truth revealed in the right place, I said, to the right people, at the right time. Can you help, huh? Stella watched me rearrange the nameplates in front of her, each card a chess piece in a game she hadn't chosen to play, but had learned the rules of, and now she was offering me the board. The foundation board meets at 5 p.m. on January 23rd, she said. 2 hours before the gala starts. Closed session. 12 members, including Adrienne. If you present evidence there, the board can address it institutionally before the public event. Damage contained. Innocent parties protected. Why would you help me undermine an event you're organizing? Stella set down her coffee cup carefully. I worked the Reeves Foundation Gala last year, January 2024. Saw irregularities in a grant awarded through Adrienne's recommendation. Same LLC structure, same vague documentation, same Whitmore Academy connection. I raised concerns with the event coordinator. They told me to let it go, that questioning major donors was above my pay grade. She pulled out her own phone, opened a folder of saved emails. 4 months later, I learned that grant involved $890,000 in fraud. The family didn't exist. The money disappeared. I've been watching Adrienne since then, documenting the pattern, waiting for it to repeat. You've been waiting for someone with standing to act. You have standing, she closed the folder, and you have evidence I couldn't access, but Lawrence, if you do this publicly, it destroys more than just Adrienne. That's why I'm here instead of going to the press. For the first time since January 12th, I felt the weight shift from solitary investigation to coordinated action. I wasn't hunting alone anymore. The relief was almost destabilizing. I'm not on the board, I said. How do I get in that room? I control the meeting agenda. Guest speakers can be added for special presentations. Stella pulled a napkin from the dispenser and wrote January 23rd, 5 p.m. board/7 p.m. gala. 3 days to prepare. Is that enough? I thought about Leone, still deciding whether protection from an immigration attorney outweighed fear of Adrienne's threats. Thought about Vernon Townsend and Dwight Diaz, ordinary people who'd witnessed extraordinary cruelty. Thought about Nicolette Cooper, 14 years old, erased from a dying man's will before he'd finished dying. It has to be, I said. Stella wrote one more line on the napkin: estate matter presentation, L. Frost, guest speaker. I'll list it like this, vague enough not to alert her. Estate matters are common. She'll see the agenda. She won't know until you walk in. Stella slid the napkin across the table. January 20th today. January 23rd board meeting. 3 days enough or not enough? I folded the napkin and pocketed it. 3 days to finalize evidence, coordinate witnesses, prepare presentation that would either expose systematic fraud or destroy what remained of my family's reputation. I stood to leave. Stella's hand shot out, stopping me. One thing. Her voice had gone carefully neutral. Adrienne submitted a last-minute agenda item. Emergency grant request to Whitmore Academy. $2.1 million, citing urgent facility needs. The restaurant noise faded to background hum. When does it need approval? January 22nd. Stella met my eyes. 1 day before our board meeting. If it passes early, the money moves before you present evidence. I looked down at the napkin in my hand. 3-day countdown had just become 2 days to stop $2.1 million from vanishing into the same mechanism that had already consumed $1.5 million. Adrienne wasn't waiting for my move. She was already 3 steps ahead, accelerating while I'd been building my case. The question wasn't whether 3 days was enough anymore. The question was whether 2 days could stop her. My phone vibrated against the hospital chair arm. While Ernest slept, Leone Rivera's name on the screen, and I knew before answering that she'd made her choice. 3 days had passed since her terrified call about ICE threats. 3 days of coordination with Desmond to secure immigration attorney protection. 3 days wondering if Adrienne had already silenced her. I stepped into the hallway, keeping my voice low. Leone? I have 3 things. Her voice was steady but quiet, like someone who'd been awake all night deciding. Text message from September, hotel receipt from October, and the file from November. What file? The one she sent me about Emma. That's what she called Nicolette in the documents, Emma. Code name, I think. Papers rustled in the background. It says very clearly, this is how we keep everything quiet. Step-by-step instructions for suppressing inheritance claims. I leaned against the hallway wall, hospital sounds fading to background static. You've had this since November. Yes. Why now? Silence stretched for 5 seconds. Then, because I didn't want to know what it meant. I could tell myself it was privacy protection, proper legal procedure, that Adrienne was helping families avoid messy public disputes. And now I know what I was helping her do. Her breath caught. September. I was doing a site visit at Whitmore Academy. Adrienne wanted foundation presents for accreditation review. I passed a girl in the hallway, 14 maybe. She looked at me, not hostile, just watching, and didn't say anything. I felt something wrong but couldn't name it. Nicolette. I didn't know then, just felt this weight. Leonie's voice dropped. Now I know what she saw when she looked at me. Someone helping hide her, someone making her invisible. I thought about Nicolette Cooper standing in that hallway, watching the foundation intern walk past with Adrienne Frost, understanding in some 14-year-old way that the system was aligned against her and there was nothing she could say that would matter. The file, I said. What else does it mention? That's the thing. Papers rustled again. It doesn't just reference Nicolette Emma. There are 2 others. Bradley Matter Hartford 2019. Sophia Resolution New Haven 2021. Same methodology, same suppression protocol. The hallway tilted beneath me. She's done this before, multiple times. It's not fraud, Lawrence. It's a system. Leonie's voice cracked. And I helped run it without asking questions because I wanted to believe in the work, in her. I realized Leonie was younger than I'd been when I started my first engineering job, when consequences meant budget overruns and missed deadlines, not deportation and complicity in erasing children. And she was choosing principle over survival with clearer eyes than I'd ever had at 23. This could still affect you, I said. Immigration complications, visa status, professional consequences, everything she threatened is still possible. I talked to the attorney you connected me with. She sounded steadier now, decision made. I know the risks, but Lawrence Nicolette is 14. Bradley was probably a child, Sophia too. They were systematically erased by institutions meant to protect them. You don't have to do this. I can't be unknowing. Her voice was quiet but certain. That's not the same as being brave. It's just the minimum. It's what should have happened in September when I saw her in that hallway and felt something wrong. I thought about courage and recognized this wasn't it. Courage implied choice between equal options. This was something simpler and harder, recognizing complicity and refusing to continue it regardless of cost. I'll have Desmond contact you, I said. He'll make sure the file transfer is secure, protected, admissible. Tell him to hurry. Fear crept back into her voice. I don't know how long before she realizes what I'm doing. I promised to coordinate immediately and disconnected. Stepped back into room 317, where Ernest slept, breathing shallow but steady. The monitor beside his bed beeped rhythmic proof of persistence, mechanical continuation that required no choice, just function. I sat in the chair beside him and thought about Leonie's voice on the phone. Different kind of persistence. Humankind that chooses rather than continues. Ernest had said something days ago in one of his lucid moments before the morphine pulled him under again. Something about Adrienne. Living with someone heartless, you don't notice at first because they're good at performing warmth. By the time you see it, you've already built your life around the performance. I'd thought he meant our mother dead 15 years. Now I understood he'd meant his daughter. I looked at Leonie's number on my phone screen. 23 years old, graduate student, affair partner turned whistleblower. Threatened with state violence for choosing documentation over silence. She has a heart, I thought. Not easy at 23, not easy at any age when the cost is this high. My phone buzzed again, text from Desmond. Don't call Leonie back. Her phone may be monitored. Adrienne just filed emergency restraining order against you. Harassment, emotional instability. Hearing scheduled January 22nd, same day as grant approval. She's boxing you in. I read it twice, then a third time. The hospital room felt smaller walls contracting. Adrienne knew. About Leonie's decision, about the file transfer, possibly about every conversation I'd had for the past week. And she wasn't just defending, she was preemptively attacking, using the legal system to neutralize me before I could present evidence. Emergency restraining order, harassment, emotional instability. If the court declared me unstable on January 22nd, my evidence became suspect. My testimony unreliable. Every witness I'd coordinated could be dismissed as products of a grief-stricken brother's delusional campaign against his sister. And the hearing was scheduled for the same day as the grant approval, ensuring I couldn't physically attend. Both couldn't stop the money from moving while simultaneously defending my competence. January 22nd. One day before the board meeting Stella had arranged. One day before the controlled confrontation I'd been building toward. Adrian had just collapsed the timeline and weaponized the calendar against me. I looked at Ernest's sleeping monitor beeping steady persistence. Looked at my phone with Desmond's warning about surveillance. Looked at the door to the hallway where I'd stood 3 minutes ago promising Leonie that Desmond would protect her file transfer. Promise I might not be able to keep if Adrienne was already monitoring every communication, already 3 moves ahead, already executing the legal strategy that would either silence me or destroy my credibility before I could use the evidence Leonie had just risked everything to provide. The monitor beeped. Ernest breathed. My phone screen went dark. And somewhere in New Haven, Leonie Rivera sat with a file documenting systematic erasure of children waiting for protection I'd promised, unaware that the promise itself might have triggered the surveillance that would destroy us both. 12 chairs around the mahogany table. Adrienne Frost at the head in navy blazer adjusting the microphone, and I walked in with the manila folder she didn't know contained the architecture of her collapse. 3 days since Desmond's warning about surveillance. 3 days of coordination through encrypted channels and burner phones. 3 days preparing for this moment while Adrian filed legal barriers, assuming I'd never reach it. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for January 22nd, 2 days away, but Stella had ensured this board meeting happened first. Adrienne's eyes found me as I entered. Brief confusion, then controlled neutrality. She hadn't expected me, but wouldn't show alarm in front of 12 board members settling into leather chairs, half-checking phones, all performing the ritual disinterest of people accustomed to mandatory meetings. Desmond sat in the corner as legal observer. Stella stood at the side door, arms crossed, face neutral. Our final agenda item, Stella's voice cut through the room's settling noise. Lawrence Frost will address an estate matter with foundation implications. Adrienne leaned forward slightly. Lawrence, I didn't realize you'd be presenting. What estate matter? I opened the folder calmly. The one involving Meridian Education Partners, LLC, and $1.5 million in undocumented transfers through Whitmore Academy. The room went quiet, phones lowered. A woman in her 50s at the far end adjusted reading glasses. January 12th through 15th, 2025. I distributed timeline printouts. My father, Ernest Frost, was hospitalized. During that period, evidence emerged of systematic fraud involving Foundation resources. I connected my laptop to the projector. January 15th, 5 p.m. This call was recorded by the recipient with his knowledge and consent. I pressed play. Adrienne's voice filled the boardroom, clinical and clear. If Lawrence or anyone from the estate asks you, confirm the donation was legitimate, properly documented, and that Nicolette Cooper is enrolled. Lyle Hewitt's uncertain response, I'd need to check our records. Adrienne cutting him off. The records are fine, I just need you to confirm what's already there. The older woman at the end raised her hand. Play that again. I played it again. 12 board members listened to my wife solicit false testimony about a child who didn't exist and money that had vanished into an LLC with no operational history. Adrienne's fingers tapped the table unconsciously, the only break in her composure. Digital evidence. I advanced the slide. Sterling Fitzgerald's IT forensics analysis. Adrienne executed iCloud keychain deletion at 11:23 p.m. on January 12, 24 minutes before I received the hospital's call about our father's deterioration. This demonstrates premeditation, not reactive panic. Another slide. Instagram metadata from leaked internal email proving coordination with Whitmore Academy administration regarding fabricated student enrollment. Final slide. Otis Gallagher's financial analysis showing $1.5 million transfer through Meridian LLC with no traceable educational expenditure. Adrienne stood abruptly. These documents were obtained illegally. This is harassment. I've filed a restraining order against my husband for exactly this kind of delusional behavior. The board chair, silver-haired man in his 60s, measured authority in every gesture, raised one hand. Ms. Frost, let him finish. Adrienne sat. Greenwich Harbor was visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. Calm surface, strong current beneath. And I realized this was what institutional power looked like when it shifted. No explosion. Just tide going out, leaving someone stranded. The door opened. Leonie Rivera walked in uninvited, crossed to the table, and placed a USB drive in the center. 12 pairs of eyes tracked her movement. I'm Leonie Rivera. Her voice was steady despite trembling hands. I work for this foundation as a graduate intern. Ms. Frost sent me a file in November. I can't keep it anymore. Adrienne stood again, voice rising. This is conspiracy. You're all... Adrienne. The board chair's voice was quiet but absolute. Sit down. Adrienne sat. Leonie continued. The file details suppression methodology for 3 children's inheritance claims. Nicolette Cooper, 2024. Bradley Hartford, 2019. Sophia New Haven, 2021. Step-by-step instructions for erasing children from estate proceedings. The board chair picked up the USB drive, inserted it into his laptop. The projector displayed a Word document dated November 3rd, 2024. Subject line: Containment Protocols Inheritance Disputes. He read silently for 30 seconds. Scrolled. Read more. Looked at Adrienne. Looked at me. 8 seconds of complete silence. No shuffling, no coughing, no breathing sounds. Only Greenwich Harbor waves visible through glass. Bradley matter suppress using statute of limitations precedent, the board chair read aloud. Sophia settle with N.D. a minimal payout. Emma ignore until probate closes, no standing to challenge. He closed the laptop. The Foundation will retain independent counsel for comprehensive investigation. Ms. Frost, you are suspended from all duties effective immediately pending review. Adrienne's voice came out small. You can't, I built this foundation. Meeting adjourned. The board chair stood. Board members filed out in silence, avoiding eye contact with Adrienne, some glancing at me with expressions I couldn't read. Stella held the door. Desmond gestured for me to leave. Adrienne remained seated, staring at the mahogany table, not crying, not protesting, just frozen. I walked to the window overlooking the harbor. Thought about Ernest's distinction between doing the right thing and taking revenge. Expected to feel satisfaction, vindication, relief. Felt none of these. Only the peculiar emptiness of discovering that justice doesn't heal, it just clarifies. Let's go, Desmond said quietly. I looked back at Adrienne, still sitting alone at the table where she'd presided over 2 years of Foundation meetings, where she'd built a reputation for educational philanthropy, while systematically erasing children from inheritance she considered inconvenient. My wife, my father's daughter, the woman who'd threatened a 23-year-old graduate student with deportation to hide fraud. The CEO who'd staged a parking lot encounter with hired actors to create alibis for theft. Father was right, I thought. I did the right thing, not revenge. I understand the difference now. Revenge would feel like something. This felt like nothing, just exhausted clarity and the weight of irrevocable choices. My phone rang in the hallway, Hartford Hospital. Mr. Frost. The nurse's voice was gentle but urgent. Your father's condition has changed. He's unresponsive. The doctor recommends family come immediately. I checked the time, 5:52 p.m. Looked back through the open boardroom door. Adrienne still sat at the table alone, staring at nothing. She's still my wife. He's still her father. Do I walk back in and tell her? Do I give her the chance to say goodbye to the man whose final wish she'd tried to erase? Or do I leave her sitting in the wreckage of the life I just dismantled, learning about Ernest's death hours later when it's too late to matter? The final choice between family and justice. Desmond waited by the elevator, hand holding the door. Adrienne sat motionless 20 feet behind me. The nurse's voice on the phone, Mr. Frost, are you coming? I had to choose. My phone vibrated on Ernest's hospital bedside table. Adrienne's name glowing on the screen, and my father's eyes opened for the first time in 14 hours. The previous evening played back in compressed frames, driving from Greenwich to Hartford, walking back into the Delamar boardroom where Adrienne still sat alone, standing in the doorway until she looked up. Dad's unresponsive. They don't know how long. She'd arrived at Hartford Hospital at 9 p.m., stood in the doorway of room 412 for 3 minutes, coat buttoned, watching Ernest's unconscious form connected to monitors, didn't cross the threshold, didn't speak, just stood there while machines beeped and oxygen hissed. Then she left. I'd stayed all night watching monitors, waiting for changes that didn't come until morning. Noon brought unexpected rally. Ernest's eyes opened, focused, and his voice weak but lucid asked, "Tell me what happened yesterday." I told him everything. The board meeting, the evidence presentation, Lyle's recording, Leonie's USB drive, the board chair reading her November file aloud, Adrienne suspended immediately. Ernest listened without interruption, eyes tracking my face, occasionally closing when exhaustion pulled, but opening again, determined to hear it all. When I finished, he said, "Good, you did it right, not revenge, justice." He closed his eyes and rested for 3 hours while I sat beside him, those words replaying like benediction or absolution. Now it was 4 p.m. The phone vibrated again, Adrienne's name persistent. I looked at Ernest. His eyes were open, watching me with the clarity I'd seen at noon, not morphine-dulled confusion, but something sharper. "It's Adrienne," I said quietly. He didn't speak, just extended his hand slightly, not reaching for the phone exactly, but gesturing permission or request. You want to talk to her? One nod. Deliberate. Certain. I picked up the phone, answered activated speaker. Adrienne. Lawrence. Her voice was tight, controlled. I need to explain what happened at the board meeting. The things Leonie said, they're out of context. The file was... Ernest reached across and took the phone from my hand with surprising firmness. Held it himself, bringing it close to his face. I realized this was the last time Ernest would exercise judicial authority, not in courtroom with bailiff and stenographer, not in chambers with law clerks, but in hospital room with daughter on phone and son as witness. Verdict carrying weight of a lifetime's moral clarity. This is your father. His voice wasn't the weak rasp of recent days. It was the federal judge delivering judgment. Silence on the line. Then Adrienne's voice, small and uncertain. Dad, you are no longer my daughter. The words fell like stones into water. No anger, no heat, just flat judicial finality. Pause. Ernest breathing steady despite the oxygen cannula. You used a child's vulnerability for financial gain. You threatened a young woman with deportation to silence testimony. You betrayed your husband while I was dying. Another pause. I could hear Adrienne breathing on the other end, quick, shallow breaths that might have been crying or shock. I have no daughter named Adrienne. 8 seconds of silence. I counted them by heartbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then Ernest pressed the red button ending the call, handed the phone back to me without looking away from my face. He exhaled deeply, the sound of someone who'd carried weight across miles, and finally set it down. Placed the phone on the bedside table with careful deliberation, then reached over and placed his hand on mine. The same gesture from January 12th. First night when he'd tried to tell me about Nicolette and I hadn't understood yet what he was asking me to protect. His hand had been warmer then, grip stronger. Now the skin was paper thin, trembling slightly, but the grip was still firm. Ernest's hand on mine, same gesture, closing the circle like a judge's gavel marking case concluded, father's touch, both benediction and transfer of burden. You can rest now, I said quietly. He shook his head once, gestured toward the bedside drawer. I opened it. Inside was a manila envelope, Ernest's handwriting on the front. Final codicil witnessed by hospital staff January 21st, 11 a.m. 11 a.m. This morning. During his rally before I'd told him about the board meeting before Adrienne had called. I pulled out the document, read the distribution schedule. Nicolette Cooper, trust $1,200,000. Lawrence Frost, $6,800,000. Adrienne Frost, $0. Notation beneath Adrienne's name. For reasons documented in attached evidence file provided by Lawrence Frost, January 2025. Witness signatures at the bottom: Ursula Valencia, head nurse. Dr. Craig Morgan, attending physician. Derek Walsh, hospital security officer, present to verify testamentary capacity. You signed this before the phone call, I said, understanding. Ernest's voice was barely audible. She needed to hear it from me. Not lawyers, not documents. From her father. The legal severance had been complete at 11 a.m. The emotional severance delivered at 4:02 p.m., both executed with the precision of someone who'd spent 40 years on the federal bench, who understood that justice required both institutional authority and human acknowledgement. The circle closes, I said. Ernest's hand tightened on mine. Agreement or goodbye or both. I looked at the codicil, looked at my father's face, looked at the phone on the bedside table showing 4:07 p.m. and Adrienne's name in recent calls. The old judge had orchestrated his final case down to the minute. Morning rally for legal documentation. Afternoon call for paternal verdict. Both witnessed, both irrevocable, both delivered with the clarity that had defined his career and would define his legacy. His hand was cooling in my grip, but the grip itself remained firm. Outside room 412, Hartford Hospital, continued its routine. Nurses walked hallways. Monitors beeped. The ordinary machinery of care that never stopped. But in this room, the circle had closed. A father had delivered his final verdict, a daughter had been severed from inheritance and family, a son held documentation of both. Ernest's eyes closed. His hand relaxed slightly but didn't release mine. The codicil rested on my lap, legal precision completing what emotional necessity had begun. January 21st, 2025, 4:09 p.m., the case was closed. I sat in Hartford Hospital cafeteria at 9 a.m. with terrible coffee and phone ringing, Desmond Mercer calling with what sounded like good news, which I'd forgotten how to process. 36 hours straight at the hospital since the board meeting. Ernest had stabilized overnight after yesterday's crisis, the phone call, the verdict, the codicil revelation. Now he slept while I'd escaped to the cafeteria for coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard and felt like the only thing keeping me upright. The phone vibrated for the third time. I answered. Desmond, I have the updates you requested yesterday. His voice carried the careful neutrality of someone delivering news to the exhausted. Are you somewhere you can talk? Hospital cafeteria. Dad's stable. Go ahead. 4 things happened overnight. You'll want to hear all of them. I took a sip of the terrible coffee. I'm listening. First, the Foundation Board held emergency session last night at 8 p.m., voted unanimously to suspend Adrienne pending independent investigation. They've frozen her foundation accounts and retained a forensic accountant. Stella confirmed via email this morning. I realized I hadn't thought about the board once since leaving Greenwich yesterday. Had been sitting with Ernest holding his cooling hand, reading the codicil, watching monitors. While I'd been focused on my father, the institutional machinery had continued dismantling my wife's professional life. I didn't even think about it, I said. That's the point. Desmond's tone shifted slightly. The system runs whether you're watching or not. You built it. Now it's running. What second? IRS confirmed receipt of the Meridian LLC referral at 6 a.m. this morning via automated system. Criminal Investigation Division flagged the transfer pattern matches, money laundering indicators, triggered automatic asset freeze at 7:30. I set the coffee cup down. How fast does this usually move? When the pattern is this clear fast, Adrienne has no access to those accounts as of 7:30. Can't touch the funds, can't move money, can't pay operational expenses or legal retainers. Legal retainers. The restraining order hearing scheduled for tomorrow. The January 22nd date that had been boxing me in, forcing impossible choices between defending my competence and stopping the emergency grant. Third update, Desmond continued. Connecticut Department of Education received the Whitmore Academy report documenting suppressed bullying incidents involving Nicolette Cooper. Independent investigation opened at 8 a.m. into institutional failure to report. Does that help Nicolette? Indirectly. It's not about your wife directly, it's about Whitmore's legal obligations to document and report child welfare concerns, creates precedent, protects the next kid. I looked through the cafeteria window at the hospital wing stretching into morning light. Somewhere in there, Ernest slept. Somewhere in Greenwich or Hartford, Nicolette Cooper went to school not knowing that state machinery had engaged on her behalf. I realized I'd built a machine not mechanical but bureaucratic, and like all well-engineered systems, once you fed it the right inputs, evidence, documentation, proper channels, it processed outputs without requiring human emotion to fuel it. Investigations, freezes, consequences, all running automatically. What's the 4th thing? I asked. Morton and Pierce withdrew Adrienne's restraining order counterclaim at 8 a.m. this morning. I straightened in the plastic cafeteria chair. Why? Official reason client's inability to maintain retainer. Desmond paused. Translation LLC accounts frozen. She can't pay legal fees. Firm dropped her. The January 22nd hearing is canceled. The hearing I'd been dreading. The legal box Adrienne had constructed appear and defend my mental competence while simultaneously trying to block the emergency grant. The impossible choice between 2 simultaneous crises. Gone. Dissolved. Not because I'd fought it, but because the IRS asset freeze had removed her ability to fund the attack. The system solved it, I said quietly. The system solved it, Desmond agreed. Board suspension, IRS freeze, DOE investigation, withdrawn lawsuit. You don't need to do anything more. Everything is proceeding through proper channels. I thought about justice and realized it didn't feel like victory. Felt like watching a program compile successfully satisfying but oddly empty confirmation that the code worked, but not the triumph I'd expected. I built it right, I said. That's what Dad always said about engineering. Build it right and it runs without constant intervention. You built it right, Desmond confirmed. I looked at the cold coffee at the cafeteria window at the morning light hitting Hartford skyline. Thought about Ernest's hand on mine yesterday, the codicil in the bedside drawer, the 8 seconds of silence after he'd told Adrienne she was no longer his daughter. Best systems run without my intervention, I thought. This is that system. Lawrence, Desmond's voice pulled me back. One more thing. Go ahead. Adrienne called my office at 8:45 this morning. I waited. Personal request, not about legal matters. He paused. She wants to see your father, asking if you'll allow it. Said she needs to see him before it's too late. The cafeteria noise, silverware clinking, conversations, murmuring, coffee machine hissing, faded to background static. The system was running, board suspension proceeding, IRS investigation underway, DOE protecting future children, lawsuit withdrawn. All the institutional machinery I'd activated through documentation and proper channels, all functioning exactly as designed. But the human question remained. Yesterday at 4:02 p.m. Ernest had delivered verdict. You are no longer my daughter. Legal severance at 11 a.m. via witnessed codicil. Emotional severance via phone call. Both irrevocable. Both executed with judicial precision. And now Adrienne wanted to sit with her dying father one last time. What did you tell her? I asked. That I'd relay the message. The decision is yours. I thought about Nicolette Cooper, 14 years old, systematically erased from an inheritance meant to protect her. Thought about Leonie Rivera, 23, threatened with deportation for choosing testimony over silence. Thought about Bradley and Sophia, 2 other children Adrienne had suppressed across years of institutional fraud. Thought about Ernest's hand cooling in mine, his voice barely audible. She needed to hear it from me, not lawyers, from her father. The verdict had been delivered. The legal severance was complete. The system was running. But did systemic justice require complete human severance? Or was there space, even after everything, for a daughter to sit with her dying father? I need to think about it, I said. Take your time, Desmond replied. But Lawrence, he doesn't have much of it left. I knew. I'd been watching the monitors for 36 hours, knew exactly how little time remained. The question wasn't about time. The question was about what justice meant when the machinery was running, and the only thing left was the space between a hospital bed and the doorway where Adrienne had stood for 3 minutes last night before walking away. I'll call you back, I said, and disconnected. The coffee was cold. The cafeteria continued its morning routine. The system ran without my intervention. But this decision, this final human complexity, required something the system couldn't provide. It required me. Celeste Cooper walked through Hartford Hospital first-floor entrance with a 14-year-old girl whose black hair fell straight and whose posture, spine straight, shoulders back, told me everything had changed. 2 days since Desmond's call about Adrienne's request to see Ernest. 2 days I'd spent not answering that question, letting it dissolve into the larger silence of institutional consequences running their course. Now Celeste and Nicolette stood in the lobby, and I realized some decisions make themselves through inaction. I met them by the elevator bank. Nicolette stood beside her mother with quiet reserve, meeting my eyes briefly before looking away, not from fear, but from the careful self-protection of someone who'd learned not to expect much from adults. Thank you for coming, I said. Celeste nodded. DOE investigation starts next week. The school has to reopen everything they buried. All the suppressed incident reports, counselor notes, everything. That's good. That's important. Nicolette will have official documentation of what happened, institutional acknowledgement instead of institutional denial. Celeste's hand rested on her daughter's shoulder. That matters. I thought about the security footage I'd watched weeks ago. Nicolette hunched at the cart return, shoulders curved inward, making herself small. The girl standing in front of me, now occupied her full height, looked at the world with level gaze instead of downcast eyes. Nicolette wanted to meet you, Celeste said quietly, to say something. Nicolette looked directly at me, sustaining eye contact this time, said 2 words, quiet but clear, "Thank you." I recalled Celeste's earlier description, refused to eat for 3 weeks after the parking lot incident, withdrawn nonverbal at school. These 2 words represented distance traveled that no dollar amount could measure. "You're welcome," I said. "I'm sorry it took so long." "But you did it." Nicolette's voice was steady. Not performance, not gratitude extracted under pressure. Just acknowledgement. I nodded, let the moment stand complete without trying to expand it or extract more. Nicolette glanced at her mother, then back at me. "Can I meet him, your father, my grandfather?" I hadn't expected this. Looked at Celeste, who seemed equally uncertain. "He's very weak," I said carefully. "He might not be able to talk much." "That's okay." Nicolette's fingers twisted the strap of her backpack. "I just want him to know I exist, that I'm real, not just numbers in a trust document." Celeste explained. She processed the trust documentation, understands what he established for her future, but she wants— "I want to meet my grandfather," Nicolette interrupted quietly. "Before I can't." I looked at this 14-year-old girl claiming family connection she'd been systematically denied, and understood what Adrienne had actually destroyed. Not money, not reputation. This exact moment, grandparent meeting grandchild, simple and unremarkable and irreplaceable. "Follow me," I said. We took the elevator to the 4th floor, walked the familiar hallway to room 412. Ernest was awake, propped against pillows, eyes tracking our approach. I stepped inside first. "Dad, you have visitors." He looked past me to Celeste and Nicolette in the doorway. "This is Nicolette Cooper," I said, "your granddaughter." Ernest looked at Nicolette for a long moment, reached out his hand. Nicolette crossed the room and took it, her small hand disappearing in his papery grip. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner," Ernest said, voice barely above whisper. "That's on me, not your uncle." Nicolette shook her head. "You're protecting me now." They sat like that for 5 minutes. Mostly silence, hands held. Celeste stood by the window, giving them space. I leaned against the wall, watching my father meet the grandchild whose existence Adrienne had tried to erase, whose vulnerability had been weaponized for financial gain. When Celeste and Nicolette left, Nicolette turned at the doorway. Thank you, grandfather. Ernest nodded, too tired for words, but his eyes tracked her until she disappeared from view. The room was quiet for several hours. Ernest slept. I sat. Evening shift began. Around 6 p.m., Ernest stirred, gestured toward the bedside drawer. "The envelope," he said. "Tell Ursula it can be thrown away." I opened the drawer, found the manila envelope I'd seen before labeled in his handwriting for Lawrence read after I'm gone. "Don't you want me to read it?" I asked. Ernest shook his head slightly. "I wrote it because I feared you'd never see what needed doing. Feared you'd stay blind to who she was, what she was capable of." He paused, breathing labored. "But you saw it yourself. You lived it. The letter is obsolete." Nurse Ursula Valencia entered for evening vitals check, middle-aged woman with efficient movements and kind eyes who'd been validating Ernest's wishes without questioning family dynamics for days. "Ursula," I said, holding out the sealed envelope. "He says this can be thrown away." She looked at Ernest for confirmation. He nodded once. Ursula took the envelope, placed it in the medical waste bin without opening it, and continued her work. Lawrence watched the letter disappear beneath used gauze and empty medication packaging. Some wisdom only exists when it's needed, I realized. Becomes waste once it's lived. Ernest had written instructions fearing I'd never discover them independently. But I had. Through action, through investigation, through choosing documentation over confrontation and systems over revenge. The letter Ernest wrote, all his judicial wisdom, all his paternal guidance was medical waste now because I'd already become who it described. After Ursula left, I pulled the chair close to Ernest's bed. No laptop this time. No phone calls to coordinate. No evidence folders to review. Just sitting. Ernest's breathing was steady. Monitors beeped softly. The evening light through the window turned Hartford's skyline amber. "What are you doing?" Ernest asked, barely audible. "Nothing," I said. "Just sitting with you." 10 days of action. Investigation, confrontation, documentation, coordination, building systems that run themselves, feeding bureaucratic machines that process justice without requiring human emotion to fuel them. And now there was nothing left to do except be present. I just sat. That was enough. Vernon Townsend drove his old red Honda through West Hartford morning light with Ernest Frost in the passenger seat, and I followed behind, thinking after 10 days in hospital fluorescence, natural sunlight looks almost foreign. The discharge had taken 3 hours, paperwork, medication reconciliation, hospice coordination, final instructions from Dr. Morgan about what to expect in coming weeks. Ernest had sat through it all with patient dignity, answering questions, signing forms, ready to go home. Vernon pulled into the driveway at 847 Elm Street. Ernest looked at the oak tree in the front yard, same tree that had been there 40 years, bare branches reaching into January sky. "Still beautiful," he said quietly. I knew he wasn't talking about the tree. "Need help getting inside?" Vernon asked. Ernest shook his head. "I can walk to my own door." The house looked unchanged from January 12th when this began. Same cream siding, same green shutters, same front steps I'd climbed 10,000 times. But everything inside the people returning had shifted. I helped Ernest to his usual chair leather recliner by the south window, worn armrests shaped by decades of use, afternoon light pooling where it always pooled. Not hospital bed with rails and call buttons, not machines beeping vital signs, just the chair Ernest had sat in for 30 years reading case law and watching seasons change. Vernon left quietly with a hand on Ernest's shoulder, a nod to me that said more than words could. Ernest settled into the chair, exhaled deeply. "Better than hospital." "I'll make tea," I said. "Chamomile, 4 minutes exactly." I went to the kitchen, the 1971 table still there, phone on the counter window, looking out at the same Hartford skyline I'd stared at 12 days ago when everything was different. Put the kettle on, found chamomile in the cupboard where it had always been timed 4 minutes on my phone. Brought 2 cups to the table. Ernest had moved from the recliner to his usual chair across from mine, the arrangement we'd maintained through decades of dinners and discussions. He didn't drink yet, just looked at me with the clear-eyed focus I'd seen yesterday when Nicolette held his hand. "I want you to do something for me today," he said. "Sit still. Don't check your phone. Don't plan next steps. Don't engineer solutions. Just sit with me and do nothing." I started to ask why, then understood. After 10 days of relentless action, investigation, coordination, confrontation, documentation, Ernest's final teaching was about stillness. "For how long?" I asked. Ernest's mouth quirked into something almost like a smile. "Until you stop asking how long." So I sat. Winter sunlight crawled across the kitchen floor at a pace measured in minutes, not seconds. I watched it move, watched dust motes drift through the beams, watched Ernest's breathing rise and fall. Time passing without urgency, without agenda, without output to produce. Learning to exist in time that didn't demand progress or resolution, this was what Ernest meant. 3 p.m. arrived. I had been sitting opposite my father for 4 hours. No laptop, no evidence folders, no witness coordination, just father's breathing light moving silence. I noticed details I'd missed before: crack in ceiling plaster shaped vaguely like Connecticut Ernest's wedding ring loose on his thin finger, the way afternoon shadows made the kitchen look like a sepia photograph. "You're getting it," Ernest said, barely audible. "Getting what?" "How to stop." I was a systems engineer, spent 40 years building solutions, optimizing processes, fixing problems. 10 days ago, I'd applied that same mindset to family betrayal, documented evidence, coordinated witnesses, fed bureaucratic machines that processed justice without requiring emotion to fuel them. And it had worked. The system ran. Consequences proceeded. Adrienne was suspended, investigated, severed legally and emotionally from the family she'd betrayed. But Ernest's final lesson wasn't about action. It was about learning when action ends and presence begins. 5:47 p.m., the phone rang. My cell on the kitchen counter, Adrienne's name glowing on the screen. I looked at Ernest's silent question. He looked back, nodded once. "Not permission to reconcile, permission to end it," I answered. "Adrienne." "Lawrence." Her voice was formal, distant. "I need to know what happens next, with the estate proceedings, with the foundation investigation, my professional reputation." "The system handles that now," I said. "I'm not involved anymore. Can we really talk, not about legal matters, about us?" I thought about Nicolette Cooper standing upright in hospital lobby. Thought about Leonie Rivera risking deportation to testify. Thought about Ernest's hand cooling in mine while he delivered verdict, "You are no longer my daughter." "After everything," Adrienne said quietly, "am I still your wife?" I looked at Ernest across the table. 10 days ago, dying in a hospital room. Now home in his chair, trial concluded, verdict delivered. He nodded, trial over. Hanging up on Adrienne felt nothing like I expected, not cathartic, not victorious, just quiet and final, like closing a book I'd finished reading and placing it on a shelf where it belonged. "You chose money over a child's dignity," I said. "Now it's my turn to choose." I disconnected, set the phone down, pulled the blanket from the chair back and draped it over Ernest's lap. "It's done," I said. Ernest nodded, closed his eyes. 5:52 p.m. I walked to the south window, looked at Hartford's sunset orange, bleeding into red, bleeding into blue. Same sky I'd watched from this window 10,000 times, but somehow different now. Ernest breathed quietly in his chair, phone dark on the counter, house settling into evening silence. I thought back to January 12th, 11:47 p.m., standing in this same kitchen making the call that started everything. That call had ended what I thought was my family, ended the illusion of my marriage, the belief in my wife's integrity, the comfortable fiction that people you love can't weaponize that love for financial gain. This call ended the aftermath, ended the question of whether destroying someone professionally meant severing them personally, ended the hope that explanation or time or shared grief might rebuild what systematic betrayal had demolished. Some calls end marriages, end relationships, end illusions about who people are beneath the performances they maintain. And some calls, these same calls, these exact moments of severance and choice, begin new lives built on different foundations. There are calls that end a marriage and begin a new life. And to you listening to my story, remember this: the people closest to you can be the hardest to see clearly. Don't make my mistake. I trusted blindly for 30 years because trust felt easier than vigilance. I thought family meant never questioning, never documenting, never preparing for betrayal. But trust without verification isn't faith, it's willful blindness. If I'd asked one hard question earlier, if I'd looked at one bank statement before crisis forced my hand, maybe I could have protected my father sooner. Maybe Nicolette wouldn't have suffered so long. Here's what I learned. Justice doesn't require anger. It requires documentation. When someone you love betrays you, systematically emotion won't save you, evidence will. Build your case like you'd build any system with redundancy, verification, proper channels. And when the moment comes to choose between loyalty to the past and protection of the innocent, choose protection. Every time. I believe God put me through this trial to teach me the difference between family that earns trust and family that exploits it. The hardest lesson isn't that bad people exist, it's that sometimes they're the ones you've loved longest. If this story moved you, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment telling me, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting someone vulnerable? Your stories matter. And if you'd like more real-life lessons like this, please subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. Final reminder, Certain details in this story have been fictionalized for privacy and storytelling purposes, but the core message about family justice and difficult choices remains true.